Hello everyone, and welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings. Number 32! Well, of the live ramblings anyway. If you hear any munching, apologies, because that's me having pizza. Because I need to eat.
Oh, having pizza. It should already be consumed by now.
Well, I had to delay for a reason. I had to go somewhere and do something. I was fucking hell! It's the return of the legend! There he is!
Don't. Or.
Ow.
He's back! After an absence of ages, he's back! Oh, I've missed you, buddy. How have you been?
Well, I'm
Do
alive.
you think Fleet's been on drugs, or...? Sounds like he's
who
been on
knows?
drugs.
It's a good question. It's a very good question.
So I'm sure you all saw the kerfuffle that went on yesterday when I finally pulled the big MacGuffin I've been waiting to pull for ages.
I'll be honest, I muted the chat. A simple solution was just mute the chat, continue on with day as if nothing happened.
An eminently sensible plan.
It worked.
Yeah,
Hey, a turboprop 810 would be fucking cool.
My
Alright?
ingenious plan worked.
Be careful
Fucking
talking about the
cool.
A10 around Fleet.
Well,
Yes.
Considering
But it
I think
would've
it was
been-
last week
but
Fleet
it
went on a
would've
whole rant
been
about
cooler
the A10.
if it had had turboprops. If Ernest King becomes first Sea Lord in 1940.
well, he doesn't like the British.
Interesting question.
Yeah, he doesn't like the British, but he's not
First thing
gonna
he does.
waste their ships.
Won't there be the problem though with how he sees doctrine and how the Royal Navy sees doctrine being completely
Yeah,
different?
I was gonna say he's not an incompetent manager, and he is not going to waste what he's given. But he is not a product of the Royal Navy. He is not. He does not
Oh, yeah,
know how to fight. He does not know how to fight the Royal Navy. If that makes any sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, so he probably wouldn't perform that well.
I don't know that he'd do that badly.
Yeah, I don't think he'll do bad. I just don't think he'll necessarily
Yeah.
do well.
Yeah.
I think he'll have a lot of other lower admirals yelling at him, "No, that's stupid. Why would we do this?"
And he will tell them to get fucked.
And they'll tell him, "No, thank you. We'll do it our own way."
Like, and that's gonna be the big problem.
He'll also probably get
Is that
removed
he
politics-wise
is-
if he starts telling politicians what to do.
Which he will do.
And then he'll probably get removed quite quickly, I suspect. And
Whatever,
yeah,
because whatever has made him first Sea Lord. Like, he's got a lot of he has a lot of opinions, and he's very my way or the highway.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when he's right, he's right. But when he's wrong, good luck telling him that.
Yeah.
I think the real casualty here would be the real knock on here is the Mark 14. Because he ripped the Bureau of Ordnance a new one when he found out they'd fucked with it. Who replaces him in the U.S. Navy?
Unless the two
That
navies
is
have
a good
somehow,
question.
unless the two navies have somehow merged and are now one humongous colossus.
that's not what the question said, though, so probably not.
Actually,
I mean, that would be an interesting question.
Hmm.
So here's a very narrow question that definitely does not have any
Oh.
butterflies attached. Okina Changsu asks, "Who do you think is the single most influential person in human history?" That's not a question that's open-ended at all, in the slightest.
Honestly, I
Rug.
couldn't tell you.
Oak Rug.
Khan.
Butterflies attached.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Khan.
honestly, yeah, I was gonna say Genghis Khan. Because I can't think of a single man who changed the world as much as he did. Like none of the Roman emperors
I can't.
Because people who conquer
Caesar.
don't really change the
If
world.
you really
that
want that
much.
true,
Oh.
then Caesar did actually do more than Khan
Anyhow.
in a lot of regards, especially for Europe.
did. Mm.
But-
I,
right.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
I
Like,
still
the,
have to disagree.
the unnamed man who invents beer.
Well,
I still have to
if you compare
disagree.
what Genghis Khan did for his territory versus what Julius Caesar did for Europe in general,
It's not what Genghis Khan did within his territory that matters. It's it's the
Like-
shockwaves that come after he's
Worse-
gone, basically.
Is
Yeah.
respectfully, though,
if
we
you
also
think
still have
about
the shockwaves of Caesar.
Yeah, if you think about it though, that was just here comes the new boss, kinda like the old boss. Because conquerors come and go. Like, because you could say that about Alexander, you could say about
Absolutely.
what you call it, Majapahit.
the thing that makes the Khan such an interesting example is how fast that whole thing is. Right?
Yeah.
They're here and then they're gone, which means there's a lot more ripple. Right? Like it's not that doesn't establish as the way it is now.
It's an explosion that then dies off, basically. But because it's an explosion, it leaves everyone reeling.
Yeah, because my proposal for this it isn't a conqueror, it's Alan Turing.
Alan
Because
Turing.
think of how much computing has changed.
Alan Turing
world.
is not a computer scientist, nor does he have anything to do with the creation of modern computing. This is a myth that was spun up after the Second World War. Alan Turing was a cryptologist. He was not anything related to modern computing. That is a myth.
He was a part of modern computing.
Let's
no.
not
Because
get
modern
into that.
computing comes out of cryptology machines.
Yeah. Also,
That's where modern
Like-
electron computing.
also,
That's where
I'm literally a
electron
computer
computing
science
comes
student. Don't
from.
lecture me on computer
Yeah,
science history.
I'm going to lecture you because a lot of people who are higher in rank than you have said opposite.
Alan Turing is only because
So,
Alan
just-
Turing is only
just
held
because
up because he got
I know-
chemically castrated.
Let's just not, shall we? Let's just not. Let's just not deal with this. Thank you for the question. We are moving on.
What is that?
Boring, but
That's a boat train.
That
why does it have snow plows? Well, I
It
guess
doesn't.
cattle plows as well, but
no, they're pilots.
Yeah. What?
No, the correct term is a pilot.
That's just that's standard operating procedure here in this country.
Yeah, it's like in the cowcatcher is the popular term, but the correct term is pilot.
Yeah, and they're just normal. You know,
Because that
it's
way,
so
if you-
that
I have
it's so-
never
it's so-
heard them refer. I've never
so
heard them
Buster
referred to as
Keaton.
pilot, but fair enough.
it's so Buster Keaton has something to sit on when he does his funny shit.
I think actually,
does no one want to tell them that that turntable for a ship looks like a very bad idea?
That looks hilarious. I want to know who pitched that and what they were smoking. Because they must have had some good shit.
to be fair, was that actually even a real thing? Question
Apparently.
mark?
Not
It doesn't.
Um,
It does not look it at all.
Oh no,
Right.
it was never. The
It's
plan
a-
was proposed, but it was never built.
It's one of your one of your typical scientific American thing we could do, but we're never gonna type.
Oh, it's the Ration Railway with the little steam-powered snowplow. Oh, I love the Ration Railway. It's my favourite. The red locomotives and the red coaches and all the meter gauge going all over the Swiss Alps in Canton Graubünden. Oh, it's my favourite. And the steam snowplow that still works even to today. Sorry, Fleet had a moment there.
A quick thing, Dragon. You know those autoloading 15-inch guns that made an FTD?
Hmm.
Putting a third one on.
Oh no.
Yes,
Autoloaded
CQ, you have met the Drac.
Nah,
To be fair, I
not enough
suspect
length.
many.
Make
To
it
be fair, I
longer.
suspect many people have met Drac. Yep, sums it up in a nutshell. As soon as he hears anything train related. Like, people used to say I was bad.
Gasp train. That's not the same
Ah,
train.
yes, the train to death. Is that going to a center of a galaxy?
Yeah, that's just killing everyone on board.
Well, I mean, they're. Congratulations, you're going to be riding this train till the end of time?
Your atoms will be, not you will not necessarily be.
Unless it's a stand-in for a
Something's
certain...
up.
Unless it's a stand-in for a certain train, but I won't get into that because I'll be here all day and I'll never get anywhere.
Even then, train no like black hole.
You can go round it.
Most
Have we-
things do not like
How do
black
we
holes.
know train no like black hole? Have we ever thrown one in?
Develop me
Yes.
an FTL engine, then, and we'll prove it.
Alrighty. I'll get
Okay.
on that.
Get on it.
Photos do not do battleships justice. Yeah, I can believe that. Oh, the E2s,
They really don't.
everyone bangs on about the E2s because it became a certain blue puffball. But the E2s themselves were terrible tank engines. They were designed for suburban work and trip freight, and they did not have the bunkerage to do either.
I suppose that's the question. Were they good at trip freight?
No. Like, as switch engines, they were pretty alright. As anything much more than that, not so much.
Hey, more Switzerland.
Alright, I'll build a Dash 8 at home instead.
Yeah. Can I get a GP3, please? Can you buy that to your order for me?
Can we get some that people actually care about now?
It's the behold the rail bus. Oh bloody hell! Look at that thing.
See, that gives you a sense of scale. Give us a question to move on.
Hey people! It's people talking about trains. I'm gonna let them. It's Fleet's random ramblings.
Hate trains, cars are better.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
Your
In
opinion
terms, of
is
trying
right.
to get, in terms of trying to get to more areas, technically a car is better, but in general travel across the country, train is better.
No? Because I
Your
don't have
opinion-
to wait.
Your opinion is noted. Moving on.
I don't have to wait 4 hours out in the cold
They're not
and
even
sit next to
needed.
some loud, obscene wanker.
We have
Playing
very
bad music
different.
incredibly loud.
We have very different experiences on trains.
What the
Like,
frick am I
first of
looking
all the trains I've been on I've been in the quiet carriage, and even the rest, there's a maximum amount of noise you're allowed to make, and they will arrest you if you go over this, because British Transport Police exists.
at?
The trains are usually on time, and you don't have to wait 4 hours. Normally, you're only waiting, if it's delayed, maybe 5-10 minutes at most. And they go faster than cars, legally.
Is that
The secret ingredient is crime.
There's a reason I said
Yeah.
legally there, because it looks at a certain
Okay.
fox.
Yeah, I mean, I only got caught doing 85 down the M5 at night,
That ain't shit.
and that was
That's
when
my
I was
daily
braking.
commute.
And
Train
that was
doing
when I was
125.
braking. And that was why I was braking to not get triggered by a speed camera because I was actually doing 898.
98 what?
Mile.
MPH.
Okay, I had to clarify. I hope you understand. Yeah, that ain't shit.
And that was in a 3-ton van.
Nice. As it should be.
With bull bars on the front.
Of course. So that whatever the hell you hit's gonna know it's been hit.
Yes.
I just
But this way, I had an argument with a concrete wall a couple of days ago, and the van won.
Yep.
They just don't build them like they used to, eh?
Frank Herbert 60 years ago. I just love Frank Herbert's doing it. It's fucking something. God damn
Hey,
it.
can we have questions?
Yes, please. Please, give us questions before we devolve into...
Otherwise, I'll start talking about my anorak collection.
And then, of course...
It's not.
And then, of course, Dragon might call in his favours. War!
That's the thing that scares Fleet more, is the fact of calling in favours.
Because I know what the favours will be, and without Dr. Clark here, I'm not confident.
To be fair, I actually was going back through it. Fleet, you know when Dr. Clark was saying, well, why didn't they build any more ships? Simple. Why didn't Britain build any more capital ships in that period, in real life?
Which period?
1916 through 21.
Oh. Okay.
Britain didn't actually lay down any new capital ships bar Hood
No economy.
at that point in time.
Yeah, but
And Drake's Drum follows the same thing.
he surrendered
No,
that, but
no
anyway.
economy.
That was just a point I'd bring up because I reread through that section.
Drakroom's
But-
Reaper asks, what if the Japanese captured Hornet? Well,
Well, the first question is how.
presumably she just doesn't get sunk. Maybe they think the Japanese surface task force is closer than it actually is.
Surely then the Americans would scuttle a ship?
Yeah, like we have ways of making a ship go to the bottom.
Yes, but remember they were trying to
But
save
assuming, well, yeah, but even if they're trying to save her and they see, you know, a number of Japanese surface warships getting awfully close, they're probably going to go, yeah,
If
No.
correctly, aren't the American carriers annoyingly buoyant?
Yes.
they are until you
Everything's
start.
annoying.
They are until you start opening, you know, the scuttle valves and then start detonating some explosives.
And if you ain't got time for that, then just blow the damn thing to hell. Like we put torpedoes into at least one of them.
Yeah.
It just
But assuming somehow the US crew do not scuttle it,
Well, what you've basically
and they do
got
manage to capture as a prize,
is the Japanese are basically they're dragging that thing back home as a trophy. Then they're tearing it apart to find out what makes it tick. The radar in particular is going to be of particular interest to them.
The radar is going to be of particular interest to them, and then the other, they might try it. They might try. It depends on what state they get it. They might try to fight it. Especially as the war goes on and they really need flight decks. They might try to fight it. I don't know that it would necessarily work all that well for them.
I think in the era that she's captured, they've got the Taihos coming down. So they've got Taiho coming down. They've got Shinano coming down. Admittedly, she's not much use. They've got.
Well, I don't.
They've
They're
got
probably not going to try to fight her immediately.
No, they've got the. But no, this is what I mean. If they don't fight her immediately, you're looking at her being scrapped, basically, because.
I can't see them scrapping her because she's a brilliant
don't
war
think that-
trophy.
I don't think they scrap her.
They need the
Like,
steel.
she's a war
like,
trophy.
what advantage? Like, apart from getting steel, what advantages do they have in just fully scrapping her? Press ganging her into services, more likely, honestly.
They don't have any
yes,
knowledge of U.S. machinery.
You're correct. Sorry about that.
Yeah, they don't have any knowledge of her machinery. She's in a very bad state. Her hangar situation is completely anathema to the way the Japanese operate. She's basically
It's still easier than sending her to a breaker's yard. Use her as an airfield.
Right,
No!
right, and didn't the Japanese get past that with other captured American ships?
No.
Like you have the Clemsons they pushed into service.
Yeah, there's a difference between a Clemson, which is a very old ship,
They might have put it back into service as just an aircraft ferry.
possible, but
Yeah.
Or
I'm
they might
still-
just give it to the IJA. If they really don't want to make use of it, you deal with it now. Give us stuff instead.
giving the IJA a flight deck and a large one.
It's
Well, they already
small
have
ones.
them. That's the thing. Like,
They've got small ones at least, and if they can manage to get some concessions from the IJA in exchange for here, have a full aircraft carrier. Now,
you know,
it might
actually,
be a
just
bargaining
about-
tool.
Yeah, they might give it to the IJA, so the IJA don't try and release the knowledge that the QWA just fucking murked. Because there's a whole thing about them, the IJA, and trying to keep that secret for a time. For quite a while, actually.
problem I've got is that I think you're underestimating the amount of effort it would take to bring her back into, even as an aircraft ferry. The sheer amount of work that would be required.
It all depends on in what state they take her.
Hmm.
Right? Because, like, okay, it's burned out. We've tried to sink it, fucked up. How burned out is burned out? Like, the question presupposes that there is something to capture. Historically, there wasn't much of anything to capture. There was a Hulk, which was sunk. Right? So that's the question. Historically, Hornet is fucked. There is nothing there to capture.
I'm always iffy about foreign nations taking ships into service, then turning them round and using them in wartime. Always iffy on that.
You make use of what you've got.
But they don't know how to operate the engines. It's basically impossible for them to learn. They don't know how to operate their flight deck lifts and her anti-aircraft guns and everything else. They've no way to know how to operate her.
I'm pretty sure they will be able to figure out how to operate most of this equipment.
Yeah, they can figure it out. They just need time.
How to maybe completely fully repair the engines from scratch? Probably not, but operate the lifts, operate the air guns, operate the ship in a general state. You could, after probably 6 months to a year, you could probably do that. If you've got a crew focusing on doing so. And it's basically just the same as working up a normal ship.
It's also a case of you're challenging engineers to not try and figure out how shit works.
The bigger problem you're going to have is challenging the engineers not to start ripping the engines apart to see how it works.
Yes. Because as an engineer,
that
you do want to do that.
Assuming the engines are in a state to work, which historically they probably won't. So if we assume that she's taken intact, and intact enough to somewhat function, then probably she's in some kind of service, like sooner or later. Exactly how
is too valuable to not put in service.
Yeah, and depending on how much of her they take intact and how much they can get working, depends on how exactly they're using it. If nothing else, she'll take a bomb that something else doesn't.
I mean, if she's badly damaged, I'd actually give more credence for her going into service as an IGN fleet carrier. Because if she's badly damaged, then you've got nothing to lose by gutting the ship, re-engining her, then basically rebuilding the ship.
With what engines? It's Japan in 1944!
42.
Like, they do not have the physical capability to do that kind of work.
Right, Seiki, we get what it was real life, but it is suggesting that
the question presupposes the question presupposes there's something,
and not just a floating hunk of steel that's about to sink.
Yes, as historically there was nothing to capture.
Yeah, the Japanese scuttled her themselves. But yeah.
I don't get if they needed steel so desperately, why didn't they just take it back for spare bits?
Would have been too much of a pain in the ass to drag back.
Also,
they don't need it that badly.
That one's actually quite easy, C-Cube.
Oh yeah. So if the British have the money to keep, if the British have the money to do so, what World War II era ships are they keeping and refitting post-war? Well,
Anson, Howey, and Vanguard, isn't it?
That's basically. Well, here's the thing.
Vanguard's finished. Then Vanguard's finished post-war, and Anson and Howey get their refits.
Yeah.
Get refitted.
Yeah. First things first. If the British have money to do so, they're probably going to keep the same post-war fleet they do historically, and they're going to start actually paying down their debt and fixing the fucking empire, rather than spending more money on the fleet or the armed forces. But
the Empire's dead, and the British Empire knows the Empire's dead.
You'd think so, but the effort they put into trying to maintain some semblance of authority in certain areas post-war is kind of goes against.
Because the British Empire has the idea of, if we can slow down colonialism, we can slow down the collapse of the Empire. We can stop Africa and Asia self-immolating and create relatively aligned states.
Yes,
the British
that's-
aren't like the French. They're not trying to keep onto it at all costs.
Yeah, but they wanted to hold on to Palestine to try and remove their forces from Suez.
Hang on.
And they wanted to.
The
and obviously-
question presupposes that the money has been given to the Navy. The Navy has
Yeah.
to do something with it.
Yeah.
What does the Navy do?
RBG suggests, well, yeah, the question suggests that what ships are they keeping and refitting post-war, but I actually think RBG might have a better point.
Yeah, he's got a point.
They
Yeah,
might-
finishing.
They probably put money into the carriers.
Honestly, yeah, because then the RN can, if the RN finishes the Audacious's and the Maltas, the hodgepodge of armored carriers can go, and you've got two uniform classes then that can last well into the 70s.
If they are told you have this money, you have to keep some ships in service, probably Ensign and Howie.
Yeah, it is.
It's either
They're
Ensign and Howe,
they're the-
or it's Renown and Vanguard.
Renown. I'm not.
There was extensive
There
plans
was a-
to refit
Yeah,
rebuild
Renown
Vanguard.
was
the Renown.
Renown was planned to have fully radar guided and almost semi-auto loading 4.5s installed.
Problem is, she's a really
Yeah,
old.
there was
problem is
also
the-
planned for.
problem is-
You see, she's an old hull, but her hull's relatively intact.
Mm,
She's still one of the fastest hulls on the planet,
Mm.
capital ship wise.
Like, the idea is basically gut her and rebuild her. Like,
Yeah, it's a case
entirely new boilers again, new superstructures needed. Vanguard-style radar refit.
mm,
Yeah,
Like-
because you also the British also planned to put high pressure machinery in the 30s. That never went through, but they wanted to do that throughout until they scrapped it. Because
I mean, I can see where you're
And
coming
also-
from, but I still.
The argument could be made that you don't need as much gunpowder, so the 615s will still suffice.
Yeah, but I
And
think if I've got
think
a choice,
Go on.
once Vanguard's
Let's move on.
it's hunting down Sverdalovs, and
and also leading
a
surface
faster
action
ship's
groups.
better.
But
Yeah, a faster ship's better.
that's
this
true. But if I can
Technically
get
speaking, you also keep consistency with ammo.
true,
Yeah.
but you also it's important to bear in mind that the RN's not building new 15-inch ammo at that point.
Why not?
True, but the Vanguard exists.
Crack them back open. Like,
Yeah,
True, but they have tens
They
of
have-
thousands of shells.
they have a lot of shells in stockpile.
I
And-
still,
Yeah.
I still think
Like-
that.
As I was just pointing out, they're not really building any new 14-inch shells at this point either.
I
Yeah.
think personally, I think
Better to be unified.
the RN is better served personally because I want you to think about this. So, in terms of long-term cost savings and retention, they're better off with Vanguard and two KGVs, Anson and Howe. And here's why I say this. First off, if they have the idea that they're going to keep these ships for a while, they're going to be rotating them through, you scrap the other KGVs, you scrap the other 15-inch ships, their barrels, mountings, all of that. That all becomes spares for the 3 ships you've got left. So all the 15-inch barrels from the other ships become spares. So the QEs, so lots of spare barrels for Vanguard, lots of spare barrels for the QEs. You've got.
You mean the
you can-
KGVs?
Sorry, KGV. Sorry. You can then draw on both ammo stockpiles. So you've got a long lead 15-inch stockpile for Vanguard and a very long 14-inch stockpile for the 2 QEs. Sorry, fuck KGVs. What is wrong with me today?
It's clear just the Queen Elizabeths just need to be brought back
Um,
in a full
but-
refit, kept in service.
And also the thing that I would like to point out that's more important is that in terms of closeness of machinery, Vanguard and the KGVs are very close in the machinery plants they've got. There's a lot of spares compatibility there.
I already had that thought saved. You wouldn't refit a QE with triple 14-inch guns, I'm afraid, Brackwin.
No. And to be fair, and I would point out that you see speeds come down in terms of just overall across the naval space as well as we get into the Cold War. You start seeing destroyer speeds drop from mid-30s to 30s, some even in the high 20s. Frigate and corvette speeds come down as well.
and that's correlating with the fact that aircraft can now go out and be eyes. It's not and can reach out and touch farther away.
So the 28 knot speed of the KGVs becomes less and less of an issue. And of course, if you do need to go tearing off after something, that's what Vanguard's for. The QEs can sit with the task forces and be the escorts of the carriers, whereas Vanguard can go tearing off around with a service action group all its own, doing 30 plus knots, while the KGVs, are operating with the carrier task groups. Because
I wouldn't have necessarily said the British destroyer speeds alter that much. Fleet.
We are not actually talking about keeping it.
Sorry,
That is Fleet misspeaking repeatedly.
Yeah, KGVs are what I mean, not QEs.
Yeah.
I don't know why my wires are getting crossed today, but they are.
Well, no, technically speaking, RBG, yes, 28 knots does cut post-war, but for fleets, the whole thing of that speeds are dropping, looking through the speeds, that's not true until you get to the 70s. The Royal Navy keeps 30 knots standard. The only destroyers that really go beyond that is stuff like the, what's called, Battle Class, up at 35. The ships before that are mostly around 30, 31. Again,
Yeah,
ships
this is the...
going exceeding that also stays as a 30 knot standard.
RBG 28 knots.
No,
28.
28
so
knots is
28
fine
knots.
post-war. It's fine post-war. It's not like it's important.
It's
It's important around that's flat-out speed. How often do task forces go tearing around at flat-out speed?
But as you've said previously, higher top speed is higher cruising speed.
That is true. That is true. I have said that. But I think it's in enough of a shouting distance to actually make it work. Because of course, as we know, during World War II, the US operated its 28 knot fast battleships with its carriers without too much difficulty.
The world wonders.
So that,
By the looks of it, I do think you would be keeping 30 to 32 knots as them to keep the 20 knot cruising speed.
yeah.
And if all hell breaks
Which
loose, you
is-
just leave. If all hell
yeah.
breaks loose, you just leave them behind. Like
Which the KGVs might be able to do it.
with
It's also-
with the war you're expecting to fight, if push comes to shove, you can leave them behind.
Yeah, it's RBG. It's fine. It's not as big of a deal as you.
I kind of agree with them, Fleet.
If you're
28
gonna
knots.
have a capital, you probably do want it to catch up with flat tops.
Yeah,
That is fair.
Like, if it, like,
Go on.
the, like, otherwise, why have it? Like, basically, you're paying for very expensive gun barge at that
from
point.
what I'm seeing,
I mean,
on average, the British fleet was moving to a 30 knot standard post-war, with the idea of the carriers being able to get that bit of extra speed with potentially up to 33 knots as needed.
in that case, then, I mean, you did talk about high pressure boilers. There is a possibility to
There is a
re-engine the
they
KGVs,
could refit them.
and that would actually
Yeah.
cost. You could probably re-engine the 2 KGVs for the same cost as the full Renown rebuild. And at that
But-
point, you've
But on the
basically
other
got-
hand,
But-
though,
on
if you
the other
do
hand-
that full renown build, you actually get a far more advanced ship out of
but
it.
you only get
But
one
it's
of them.
also a case of, right, can I
Right.
put the point
But
forward
you've got
for now?
Vanguard.
But you've now
yeah,
got Vanguard.
but-
You've got 2 15-inch ships sailing around.
But the whole thing with Renown is the fact that, unlike the KGVs, he has a much more. She's part of the reason she's so fast with comparatively little engine power is she's extremely hydrodynamically efficient.
I'm aware.
The Royal Navy sort of already has all the documents and the developments to re-engine them because there were plans and they designed it to in the 30s. They know how to they have the plans to re-engine them.
I still
Secondly,
think you're
it's
giving.
a case of, but it's also a case of
Realistically.
in the 70s you can slow down, but what's the threat in the 50s for the surface action groups?
I still feel
It's the
that
kamikaze cruisers, like the Sverdlovs.
I still feel that the option is you're putting lifespan on an old hull that's got 10 years left on it at most before it basically cakes over in rust and dies. Whereas Anson,
What are we
It's not
talking
rusting away
about?
that badly.
But it's rather a case of
Sorry. What did you say, Cyclic?
What are we talking about?
someone
Basically,
asked,
you've been given money explicitly to refit and keep some battleships in service post World War II for Britain.
well, it was
What
ships
do you-
generally,
or
not
keep
just.
ships in jet. Yeah, but we've been mostly going off battleships so far. Like, what ships would you keep in service for the Royal Navy?
And there's a bit of
Because
a
you're not
divide
allowed.
here.
You're not actually allowed to use that money anywhere else.
Yeah, there's a bit of a divide here. Some people are saying, like Foxo is saying that she thinks a full rebuild of Renown is worthwhile, whereas I'm saying keep Anson and Howe instead.
Anson and Howe I definitely think are a valid option, but I think
Vanguard.
both are valid options. But no, the idea is that
And
Vanguard's already getting finished.
Okay, so
So
I'd
that's
take one of the
great.
battle cruisers then.
Okay, then if
If-
it's all
Yeah.
against me,
If-
then I'll back down.
Actually, so then out of
If
curiosity,
you deem
what's
it-
your logic?
Hang on. If you deem it viable,
Yeah.
based
But the Royal
on
Navy thought it was viable.
based on condition of hull, and that's something you're going to have to that we quite frankly don't
Spend a
have
fair
visibility
amount of money doing a whole lot of poking around.
if it's not that expensive to do the poking around.
Yeah.
The alternative to that is the later full bore light cruisers.
Oh yeah,
Instead,
I'd forgotten
because
about
you
that.
have Vanguard, you can do a single heavy sag if you need to. To use modern terminology.
It would be nice to see something like Minotaur or Neptune's potentially, but
Well, I mean, it's more like whatever the later derivations of the crowns. I'm not too familiar with the names. I know
the
they're
other
more
Minotaur.
classic,
Yeah, the
Um,
Minotaurs
well,
were
I'm not
essentially
talking-
British
I'm-
Worcestershires.
but I'm talking purely ships that have already been built by the end of World War II here. Like Vanguard was going to get completed. So you keep Vanguard and then a couple light cruisers, because realistically, the threat's the Sverdlovs. Okay, is a Sverdlov versus one of those later town derivatives, like war production town derivatives, got a fairly good chance at beating them under the water? Yeah. But 2v1 is a bitch. 3v2 is a bitch.
I actually don't see them
And-
keeping colonies or Minotaurs as built around. They might keep more of the towns around, is my thought.
Yeah.
Whatever they feel is going to be in the best condition. Because the towns saw a lot of action. Some of them you definitely do not want to keep around. And Belfast is
True.
one of those ships. Okay?
But
Belfast
was
should not be
yeah.
kept around as a warship. If you want to keep her as a museum, that's fine. But the damage that she suffered in the war does not mean that she is good for another 10, 20 years of service.
No.
She was kept
Absolutely
in
not.
until 60. She was, to be fair, she was kept in until 63.
Which I
I'm
always
talking
thought-
like active use
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Sailing up into the North Atlantic.
Getting
Whenever
pounded
you have
by
a ship's keel broken, unless things are done perfectly, things
Yeah.
go south quick.
Yeah, Belfast was sailing around through 50s
Okay.
and early
Well,
60s.
That's surprising.
I mean, if she got
She was given a refit fleet in
if she got
55.
properly rebuilt,
Yeah.
structurally, then she's actually probably one of the best contenders to keep.
Because I believe what part of the problem they had with the Crown colonies and the Minotaurs, again, I'm just going to call them Swiftshires from now because there's another Minotaur design right after them, is the Royal Navy basically looked at them, kept some of them around, but a lot of them just didn't have the actual tonnage or capability to really be improved post-war. Their size just wasn't sufficient for the plans of what the Royal Navy had, I believe. They did do a couple of ones, with remakes, like Swiftshire, but there was a number of problems with them, as I recall.
I'd like to raise a point as well while we're talking about this. If we've got money available, and assuming that the RN did keep a sizable fleet in the immediate post-war period, even though it was being drawn down, the RN did keep a sizable fleet into the 60s. So, if we've got more money than that, might I propose finishing the Maltas?
Well, yeah, we have already
I
suggested
think-
that fleet,
I
remember?
think that's your
We did
best.
talk
That's
about this.
your best case scenario was flat tops. If flat, but the question was keep and or refit. It wasn't build new.
Like, we all agreed that newer carriers would probably be a good thing. RBG said this, and you agreed with him, Fleet, if you remember.
Yeah.
The
The lions have had the steel for them. The lions are long gone. Any lion derivative would have to be a new build because of how radical the design changes they were making to the concept were. And
Emirates original armor belt still around.
yeah, but even so, it's not really like it's one thing. It's one thing to tear down and rebuild just Renown, which is a hull we already have. It's entirely another to say we're going to build a lion to some wacky design that we've got.
Yeah.
The thing is,
It would be really, like, my biggest thing would be if you gave me the money to do this with the World War II ships, I would give my damnedest effort to try to say, no, please let me build the Maltas instead.
yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because what the Maltas do for the RN is they likely mean, in all honesty, the RN doesn't lose its Catabar carrier force.
Mm-hmm.
Which has implications to the present day.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Because realistically, if the Maltas get built, the Maltas are getting replaced in the post-Falklands War environment if the Argentines even go for it, curb stomped the crap out of the Argentinians.
To be honest with you, Cyclic, let's be real here. The junta in Buenos Aires
They
is
might
desperate
still have
enough.
gone for it.
Yeah, they're desperate
They
enough.
may, depending on what's going on in British politics at the time, because their thought was the Brits didn't have the stomach for the fight.
They were wrong.
Generally, when people make that assessment about countries, they're wrong.
Yep.
See Ukraine, see the multiple times it's happened to the US. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, you won't. You want to fucking bet? Well,
Why British fleet
shouldn't have
carriers go
taken that.
pretty? Simple, because they were. I would say they're designed to look pretty, but they have function and form. British fleet carriers are just a gorgeous-looking carrier.
I will admit, though, I will admit, US carrier design from Midway onwards, I really like. I really like.
I'd actually argue the opposite. I like some of the earlier US carriers, stuff like Ranger and Wasp and such.
Especially Midway in her final form, before she's decommissioned. I absolutely love.
roll.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Roll.
I take it they rolled quite a bit, or
Oh, yeah,
I'm not
Midway-
familiar.
They
Yeah.
rolled. So Midway herself rolled past the predicted point of no return.
And came back, I presume. Then
Yep.
Barely.
But she did look very attractive.
that would have been it being an embarrassing report to High Command.
So-
So she
Ship
rolled
fell over.
over.
Yeah, the ship fell over. What?
No, I was wondering when he was going to show up. Hello, Dr. Clark. See, it seems like this is a thing.
Hello.
Yep, there we go.
This is a
See,
thing now.
what summoned him was my response to you saying that about
How we
Midway
doing?
and me going, roll.
Battle carriers?
Oh.
I've said nothing about battle carriers. I don't know what you mean, Dr.
Yeah, to be
Clark.
fair, Fleet has not. To save Fleet's soul, he has not talked about battle carriers yet.
Even I know they're ridiculous. All of you
Clark,
know.
you wouldn't have had a chance if he had.
Yeah, all of you know my stance on battle carriers. I think they're aggressively silly. Aggressively silly. I have always stood
As
by
much
that.
as I want to disagree with you, I do agree with you.
That's
They-
good.
A
Like,
carrier
I feel
has
they
no
have
business.
incredibly.
Yeah,
Oh,
a carrier
yeah.
has no business in the battle line, and if you have a battleship with a carrier flight deck, that is weight that you could be using for other things, and you're just.
Meanwhile,
asking
the
to get-
Soviet Union's sticking an abhorrent amount of granites on a carrier.
Well, at that point, things are slightly different in terms of the
It's-
operational environment.
It's a very similar effect, though.
It is. I'm not gonna lie, but there were different reasons for why the Soviets went with the Kiev design that we've discussed.
I'm not
previously.
talking about the Kiev.
Oh
the
no!
Kiev makes far more sense
Oh,
when you
no.
take into account its context. I'm talking Gujitsu.
Oh no, no.
I said granite.
Oh yeah. VLS away! I can't.
Hey, forgive me for being uneducated, but what's wrong with the Russian / Soviet idea of the
Missile
aviation
carrier.
cruiser?
Well,
Okay.
No,
so-
the aviation cruiser exists because carriers aren't allowed through the Straits of Hormuz.
No, and no. The
afraid of Hormuz.
Soviets and the
Oh, no.
Russians are more than able to move ships out or move ships that were built in there for maintenance as needed.
Yes.
The reason for the aviation cruiser has to do with one person whose name I cannot remember, but he was basically the head of the Soviet military-industrial complex, and this guy hated carriers. I can't remember his freaking name, but he was in this position from the time of Stalin through to the 80s.
Not. Yeah, I know who you're talking about, but also that's a bit overblown because it's actually due to some of the wordings of the treaty to do with the Dardanelles and getting out of the Black Sea.
I've heard that, but the Soviets had a pretty big cop-out with if their only maintenance facility was there.
Yeah, and that might be a cop out, and he might be. But the trouble is, the people who managed the entrance and exit to it were Greece and Turkey, who are NATO members, and Turkey specifically, it's straight through their country. And so the Soviets were very keen to make sure they were at least looked like they were ascribing to the letter of the law, and that was a big part of it for the Black Sea and for the operations there, which is where they come from. But also there's the whole phraseology they use around their ships, which means a lot of things get translated into cruiser when you turn them into English. And to be there, in their phraseology, they mean to an extent large ship.
Yeah. It's kind of like the Japanese in the term destroyer, as you see it. Yes, that's the official translation, but it really means escort, which when you look at their flat tops today, what are they?
Escort.
They're helicopter aviation escorts. And my power just blinked. Am I still here?
Yeah, you're still here. You got it. Yeah. That was
You're not like my
Okay.
headphones, which literally died at the meeting I was in. Then I got a message from my mum, which was, I think the Foo's about to go into battle carriers. You'd better stop him before he hurts himself.
the fact that this keeps happening, I'm like thinking, you know what? Like, because this all started like a few weeks ago, and literally I said, Dr. Clark, would you mind coming on? And Dr. Clark came on. And then I was like, okay, that was a nice one-off, and I'll have him back in a couple of weeks' time. Every single week since then,
I'll be honest with you, I've been keeping an eye on the chat, just going, is he going to turn up this time? Is he lurking?
I'm
Is
just
he hiding?
taking it.
Is he hiding
I
on the
don't need
YouTube?
to lurk. I don't need to lurk. My mum is a fan of the Foo.
This is just a thing I have to
And
accept
An
now.
interesting thing to learn.
Thing is, the other thing she's a fan of at the moment are Fuoco, who I still am not sure, but
Fuecoco?
apparently they go bow a lot. And apparently there's a very nasty rapper who's nixed their bow terms, and she thinks they should sue them. And I'm sitting there going, that is more information than I ever needed to know about this scenario.
Yeah, I know. Same here.
VTubers.
Yes. Look, my mum has... But she's coping with the stress of moving in her own way, and one of them is developing a love for VTubers. And as
Fair enough.
long as that only occasionally results in her heading over towards the ship girl VTubing sphere, which is what I'm going to describe it as, we can be okay.
Wait,
I can be
Fleet is
afraid.
confirmed
but then we can
VTuber,
move it.
just saying.
Huh?
I'm saying Fleet is a confirmed VTuber,
I
just
could
saying.
believe it.
Apparently that's the thing that Foxo's got on the back burner, which horrifies me to this day.
Good to know.
So,
What?
So, are you going for a Hosh themed?
Oh yeah,
one,
if
or
it's
are
gonna
you
be
going
harsh.
for
Like, if I-
his Spanish battleship theme?
No, if I'm
Which one
well,
is your
if I'm-
the food?
well, it's not gonna be a person. It's
Right.
going to be the battleship itself, and I'll probably be some
Yeah.
sort of
Are you
little
sure-
stick figure
Are you
on
sure
the
about this
bridge.
fleet?
Well,
Are
because
you sure about this
because-
fleet?
yeah, I'm not allowed to show you it, but 'cause it's still work in progress.
Wait,
There's
you've actually done it?
currently-
You
There's
can show
current-
it to me. I'm the soul of discretion. I'll just make sure I save an image and share it in the ship-shape chat between the four of us.
Okay, one of them's an anime girl with a hood hat on.
Oh no!
Oh,
This
that
is.
sounds wonderful, Foxo. I like where this is going.
I do not weeb the fleet. Do not weeb the fleet. Fleet does not
I'm
deserve
sorry,
to be
fleet.
weebed.
You're a weeb
No
all along.
way.
The whole time.
No,
Your protests are worthless.
no,
Yep, see, the chat agrees.
no! I don't want to be weebed. I don't even have the facilities. I'll have to buy a camera.
That can be arranged.
Technically, you don't have to.
Okay, so
Very
since we have Dr. Clark here, let's
Mhm.
pose to him
Yeah.
what surface action oriented ships. It's 1950. Right, you guys said 1950, or did you say
no,
it
1946?
no,
just,
it's
it
immediate.
just says post-war.
Yeah, it just says post-war.
Immediate post-war
Yeah.
in the RN that are currently in service. You're given the money to say. You're given money to save. Which ones do you keep? Obviously, Vanguard's going to get kept anyways. So
It explicitly
let-
it has to be refit or rebuilt. So you can't say divert funds to another project.
Surface action.
yeah.
No, well, the surface
You
action
could refit.
and any
You could
ship.
refit.
I mean, I
submarines,
guess if yeah.
So I can refit or refurb.
Yeah, refit, refurb, or keep, and it can be any ship
no
that's
new-
around
no
that
new
period.
build.
And I'm the Royal Navy, right?
Yes,
Yes,
you're the
you are the
Navy.
Royal
Mhm.
Navy.
Oh, good. Right then. So I'm going to do a great refit of Lion and Temeraire.
Eh? Weren't they gone by this point?
No, their hulls are still there,
Oh!
and it's a great refit. You know what the Royal Navy history with great refits is.
He's got us back to rights!
You gave me the option of refit. I mean, and clarified Royal Navy. Yes, we've got a history of this. Great refits.
Oh, God, here we go again.
If
What
I'm
do you
being
mean
more,
it's just
if
a
I'm
lump
being
of
more
steel
be
in a
honest, the
dockyard?
spirit of it would be Anson and Howe. It's got to be, because honestly, there are some cruisers I would like to sort out. I'd probably work with some of the town class cruisers as well. But let's be honest, the counties need to go. They're too old. There's nothing. I can probably HMS London. I can keep going, as she's had a fairly big refit prior to World War II, but her engines are knackered by this point, and so are the things underpinning her turrets at this point. And when I say things underpinning her turrets, I mean the base points which connect her turrets to the actual hull. I just can't remember the name for the special beams they use there. Going through the rest of the scenarios, you've got the battle class destroyers. They are fairly surface action orientated. I would probably try and get them to as high quality as possible. And frankly, for the rest of it, if you want me to have surface action strength, it's Anson Howe, and it's looking at King George V and Duke of York and deciding if I can do anything with them. If I need to, if I've got, it depends on my budget. If I've got the budget, then Duke of York and King George V are probably what I go after next. But surface action-wise, it's the battle class, and it's Anson, Howe, and Vanguard.
That's really interesting, because I came down on Anson, Howe, and Vanguard. The majority of the rest of the panel leaned towards a full gutting and rebuild of Renown.
Look, you are not going to get a bigger Renown fanboy than me. I love her. I've pretty much covered every single book ever written about her since about 1930. There were books being written about her then. Her engines and her hull are knackered by that point. If you are basically, in the moment I said, oh, honestly, I can't do a great rebuild, a great refit, then I can't do Renown, because if you want to take Renown, you are doing something which is going to be a bigger work than Victorious. You're going to have to rebuild that entire ship the whole way through. I agree, she's completely useful, and I would love to do it, but it would almost be cheaper to take HMS Rodney and refit her to a workable level than it would Renown.
How far out is Renown, for context?
Well, she's well past.
Let me put it this: she's her engines. They not only need to replace her engines, they need to replace the framing which her engines are on. Which means they basically need to rebuild the entire hull and keel around that area. Because they've put so much force into them by pushing so fast, they've actually managed to twist some of the keel plating.
Impressive.
Watching at home, that is bad.
Yes!
It's not supposed to do that.
No! By the way, this is the point I sometimes make about Royal Navy ships when people quote speeds to me. I go, well, at that speed, they don't twist their hull plating. They went fast enough, they managed to cause damage to their hull plating and their keel plating. That means they were going faster than the speed they were supposed to be. They're supposed to be their maximum speed.
I'm guessing Renown does that a lot then?
Or did it enough that was problem? Because from what I read, there was actually a plan to refit and rebuild Renown. But it was basically scrapped as, we don't even have a hope in hell of getting that money.
Yes, they did a survey of it.
When was this?
About 1944.
Okay. And they would have had to... Okay. Yeah, that makes sense then. Because they ran her hard.
Yeah.
Well, by this point in time, she's been in service for what, like 29 years?
She entered service 1916.
Yeah.
By 1944, she's been in service for 28 years.
Was Renown one of the ships that was due for like a routine engine refit right when war started?
No, she'd had it. She had the modernization prior to war.
Okay. I can never remember which ones got it and which ones didn't. Thank you.
Repulsion Hood did. Repulsion Hood hadn't managed to get it. She had hers. And that's one of the reasons why she is... You have to remember Renown's wartime history. She's the backbone of Force H for about 3 years. Every time Force H is doing something heavy, she's there. She's the one chasing down Sharnos and Gneisenau off the coast during the Norway operations. She's doing all things in the Central Atlantic.
Literally screaming at them, "Don't run away from me, you cowards! Come back and fight!"
And she's pushing her engines for all they're worth in a storm.
And then turning around and doing it again.
Yes.
So,
I do think the logical approach is probably Anson Howe.
Yeah. So just to sum up real quick, because I feel like I'd like to move forwards slightly. So we're basically all roughly in agreement. We want to keep some of the cruisers. We want to definitely get Vanguard, and we want to definitely get Anson and Howe in the long term, and maybe, if we've got the money left over and we can find out something to do with them, some of the other KGVs as well.
If somehow we've also been given an utterly ludicrous amount of money by an incredibly wealthy investor saying, I don't want this ship scrapped, hello Renown.
Big if. But
very stupidly big.
Honestly, if you've got that amount of money, you could do a great refit on a Lion class far easier.
Yeah.
And you'd have a far better ship.
Yeah.
Or just put that money into getting a Malta.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's even far better idea.
Yeah.
And I think you missed me earlier, Dr. Clark, going, those are ships that change the future of the Royal Navy.
Maltas do, yes.
Yeah.
Completely to the present day.
Me and Drac have worked through this. Drac's done the actual funding, but me and Drac have talked through this on far more occasions than, frankly, probably poor Gareth and Gareth de Brit and Dr. Dan, AK, would really like to remember. We've done this in airport lounges, we've done this on planes, we've done this on trains. the conversation of what happens if instead of the fact that the money spent on HMS Victorious could have completed the 4 Maltas, and what happens if you have the 4 Maltas as the basis of the fleet air of the Royal Navy for the next 40 years from roughly 1948 onwards.
You probably get a far better Royal Navy.
You've got a far more efficient force, you've got a far more efficient structure, and you've got a far stronger, more capable force. And frankly, you have
A
force
far more
which is
relevant
capable of delivering a lot
force.
more.
Also,
Yeah.
just quickly try and
You've also got
because
one.
Bracken's quickly.
Sorry,
on.
I'll just finish. Just to
Yeah.
make the final point, you've also got one that's far more resistant to defense white papers than the historical RN was.
Yes.
Either though?
Yes, absolutely.
Because the
They're
economy's
able to
still
they're able to
fucked.
argue
Yeah,
Yeah, the
argument is
economy's
we've
still
usability a
just
lot
built.
better.
Yeah. The argument is we've just built
Uh,
4 new carriers. You're not getting rid of these brand new carriers.
And you've also got the point, Foxo, that they're 4 of the same carrier to the same design
Yeah.
that use the
But-
same
And
parts.
it's
But the Treasury's just going to raise an eyebrow and go, right, it's the 60s. It's the economy in the 60s.
Yeah,
You
they-
want-
Yes.
How many carriers around?
sure, but
There are-
junking them also represents losing a greater capability.
which the
The-
government was unfortunately
Like
willing to do. So.
historically, Britain's in a really awkward position where you're not top, like not top of the pack. That's not the right term, right? But
I know
you're
what you
not. You're muddling along, and it is easier to stop doing that than to get rid of a more capable force, if that makes any sense.
I'd also say the thing is, if you have the 4 carriers as the basis, especially around those 4 carriers, especially if you're forming into NATO, you have to remember one of the things that's used to justify keeping things, and one of the things which causes the Treasury every time they want to cut the Royal Marines. What the Royal Marines saved by? Because one of the things Britain's promised to provide is an amphibious task group and a brigade-strong amphibious task group to NATO for the northern flank. Well, one of the reasons why Britain didn't promise carrier battle groups was because they didn't know how well they could sustain them, and so they made a very loose promise on terms of naval support. If you have 4 carriers of the same group and you have 4 carrier battle groups, then imagine what the government forming NATO would probably promise. Oh yes, we guarantee there'll be a carrier battle group, Royal Navy carrier battle group in the North Atlantic to support Strike Fleet Atlantic, and we'll do a shared leadership of it with the US Navy, where we get it 1 in every 3 times we get the Admiral of the Commander-in-Chief Strike Fleet Atlantic. Something like that to try and preserve British status. At which point, the moment you're signed up to that, there is no way a British government is abandoning that, because that's going to be their ego.
So, here's one. How long do you think they'd actually remain in service for then, these 4 Maltas?
The timeline that I like to see, and that I think is highly likely, is you've got almost the ERA plating to the Maltas, which is the older fleet carriers. So the RN can basically foist them off first to keep the 4 Maltas going. Then by the 70s, you're looking at a rotational system where you've got probably 2 in reserve, 1 in refit one in a refit cycle coming out of reserve to rejoin the fleet, and 1 currently in the fleet, because that saves more money than having 2 in service, 1 in reserve, 1 in refit.
Actually,
For how long are they-
You've missed something. You put 2 in ordinary, and one of those would be 1 on 1s in refit, and the 2 in service would be alternating. And the reason you do that is because if a ship is in ordinary and in refit, you don't have to maintain a naval crew of it. Whereas if it's in refit and in service, you have to maintain a naval crew of it because it's still technically a commissioned ship.
Ah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Also, how would CVA-01 affect these 4 Maltas?
They just don't get
Would
built.
they
how-
still
later.
just not bother?
For how long are they still viable as frontline carriers?
They are
how long-
viable as frontline carriers from the Royal Navy perspective all the way through to the 1990s.
Look at the
More
midway.
likely.
What are they flying off of them?
Midway.
So they can operate the Phantoms far better than any of the carriers the Royal Navy had historically, and I do mean far better. You probably couldn't efficiently, although you could stretch it, operate a navalized Tornado, but realistically, by the time the Phantom, as long as you procure more modern missiles than Skyflash or a better engined version of Skyflash, by the time the Phantom's going away, you're getting the early Hornets. Okay? And that's a huge thing for driving cost of the air wing down. Because now you're running a strike fighter air wing.
Okay.
You don't have to run a single type strike fighter air wing if you want to keep the Bucks around or go to something else as a dedicated attacker. But the Legacy Hornets give you better air-to-air capability than the Phantoms do. And just dramatically better air-to-surface. Either air-to-ground or surface or water.
What was it you said when we discussed this a couple of months ago? That Buck would likely stay around for a while Hornet fades in?
It very easily could.
I'm reckoning the Buccaneer will probably stay around for quite a while to British wash the air group. That's going to be it.
Yeah.
The Buccaneer will be.
Yeah.
The Buccaneer. If you remember historically, the Buccaneers are still serving. I think definitely still serving Gulf War 1.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gulf
Yeah,
War Wars, they get
the
retired off Gulf
the
War
Bucks
One.
could end up staying around the entire life of the carrier, like to the end of the lives of the carrier.
Yes.
Because there was also a planned upgrade for the Buccaneers that they didn't go through with. In the
Yeah.
end.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
but that-
mean,
they
RPGs
figured out that the airframes
Yeah.
were fucked for the Buccaneer.
RPG's mentioning the supersonic refit.
I mean, as I said in the chat, I don't think that's likely. You don't need a supersonic strike asset.
It was part of just the general upgrades, though, Fleet. It was
No,
improvements across the board as well.
So-
right. The supersonic Buck was a complete replacement of the Buccaneer.
Fleet, the biggest thing a supersonic strike aircraft
the Super
allows
Hornet
you.
is not a success to the Hornet.
Yeah,
Is the Super Hornet not just a modified Hornet?
I don't know enough about that, but
That was the argument done.
Yeah.
yeah.
It may have been bullshit, but who's to say?
Anyway, Cyclic, you were saying about supersonic strike assets just now?
So, what a supersonic strike asset gives a carrier air wing is a way to get a strike in. Although, less the strike in, more get it out and back to the carrier.
Oh,
Because
now
they've
I
dropped their ordnance, they don't have the drag. They can pile on the speed
see. And just
and
book
get
it.
out.
And just book it,
It's-
basically.
Yeah, it's the difference between one strike and two.
It's not even that. It's the difference between, oh, we knocked out the target, but we lost our strike
To
And
because
knocked
they
out
got
the target and the
pounced
strike
by
made it home.
MiGs on the way out. Because the amount of just the sheer hilarity of numbers of MiGs the Soviets had up in the high north is terrifying.
It was absurd, like genuinely absurd.
And they don't have to be
in the
particularly
Buccaneers'
great.
In the Buccaneers' defense, they whenever they went to the big American air warfare exercises, which they did go to quite regularly, they like to terrify the US pilots by how low they'd fly. So, I think whilst I do agree with you, the sheer number of MiGs means they would lose a lot of them, and maybe even lose a whole strike. I think you probably have also more MiGs than actually more MiGs lost than Buccaneers, mainly due to flying so low they end up crashing into the ground themselves, trying to engage the Buccaneers.
And that's just with the normal
I
book.
mean,
If we
sure,
get-
but you know,
Sure,
as a
but
carrier,
they can trade.
yeah, as
they-
a carrier, you generally don't want to get into that attrition fight.
Like they have the numbers to trade 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and still kill the whole strike.
Or
Like it does
more
not matter.
realistically, force the carriers to have to withdraw much earlier than they would have liked.
Because they don't have a strike aircraft to continue.
Yep. Or their air wing's been so mauled, they have to make the decision. We need to pull back and reconstitute the air wing. Because we
apparently
don't want to be the Imperial Japanese Navy. And what is our pilot corps?
Oh, it's
Pilot Corps.
Where has it gone?
No. You just add an E to the end. Add an E to the end.
Polite core. Very funny.
No, Pilot Corps.
Just keep in mind, the Buccaneer was removed historically in 1994. If they
Yeah,
did get
so-
the other upgrades that was planned,
Yeah,
it might
but,
just keep going.
no, but the
um,
issue with the Buccaneer is that There's design faults in the airframe itself when it goes between Mach point 8 because of the extra pylons they add.
That's why it was
So-
a whole new aircraft.
So you refit them.
Quote unquote refit.
Yes, definitely. These are definitely the same Buccaneers. Honestly, we swear, Gov, genuinely, totally.
Check the serial numbers and everything. The only thing original is the VIN plate, but that's there.
Anyways,
Look, random idiot, and I always find names like this on Discord very disconcerting because I feel like I'm being rude to you, but it's your
Just call him
name.
Dixie, that's what I do.
If you have
much
you ever
more
looked
rude.
into the Royal Navy helicopter maintenance program?
I have not.
Okay, so a Merlin will go through a full service every 3 months. And every 3 years, the aircraft is stripped down to the bare airframe, and everything is rebuilt onto it. And airframe components which need to be replaced are replaced. Now, this is all a public record. The reason this is a public record is because when the Combined Helicopter Force was created, the Army and the Royal Air Force both objected to the Royal Navy's excessive maintenance requirements and suggested that they should adopt to harmonise on one of their standards. The Royal Navy refused to on the grounds that saltwater damages aircraft and airframes so much they'd have to upgrade to Royal Navy standards. This caused the Royal Air Force's maintenance budget of helicopters to have to go up by 250%, and caused the British Army's maintenance budget for helicopters to go up by somewhere in the region of 1,000%,
Good lord.
due to the level of maintenance they've been doing.
Why did they create a United Helicopter Force and not just keep separate maintenance standards? This just seems silly.
And because the other two services wanted to operate from Royal Navy carriers with impunity. The Royal Navy do not like having aircraft aboard their carriers which are not working.
Which is fair.
Which...
But
Yeah.
but this led to also the point when there was an RAF engineer who honestly turned around and said, "But the Royal Navy are functionally building a new aircraft every 3 years."
The aircraft...
Engineers in a corner.
No. The engineers aren't in a corner. The engineers are happy because everything will work and it's all sorted, and and we can check it and poke it and prod it and it'll all work. The engineers are happy.
They have a central maintenance unit at a squadron which of the airframes are sent to in Cold Rose, where they are literally, that they have air, and that's also where they train the engineers on the aircraft.
I mean, that'd be a
Fantastic.
good place for it. You could see how all of it goes together.
Hey.
Literally all of it.
It does also make you wonder, though, how little maintenance was the army doing on these helicopters?
Well, they weren't doing little maintenance.
One
The
reason
point
why I
about-
will
the
never
point
get
about
aboard
solar
an army
damage is a
helicopter.
very good one.
I am never getting aboard an army helicopter. Ever.
It's also true that helicopters really, really, really don't like to be airborne.
You know,
You are
most things
forcing
don't.
them-
just
Yeah.
remember, you control a helicopter by flapping its wings. I am not lying. That is
Yep.
actually how you do it.
Yep. That's exactly right. Let me see.
They are not the natural state of a helicopter is not in the air.
What goes up will definitely come down in this instance.
And they all strongly desire to return to the Earth.
Because I also seem to remember that those different standards came up in the Falklands War from some of the material I've been reading, where they mentioned since the Royal Navy was so desperate for Harriers, they actually got a couple of land-based Harriers for temporary usage, and they noticed, the salt water's actually corroding through these Harriers after basically just getting them from the UK, the Operation
yes.
Point.
The RAF Harriers turned up on the carriers, and within very short amount of times, the Royal Navy aero engineering officers having panic attacks because they saw their maintenance logs.
Christ.
They were
And you're
desperate to try
talking about a
and get
navy.
third wing.
You're talking about a navy, and Steve George says this best, and he was the second in charge of maintenance in a helicopter squadron down there, which, when they went to war in the Falklands War, did not stop doing their routine peacetime maintenance standards. At no point did they, throughout the war for naval aircraft, drop anything with, we don't need to do this maintenance to maintain operational because we're maintaining operational capabilities. No, you maintain the operational tempo, you still do the maintenance to what you would normally do in peacetime.
Because that way things don't break.
It's simultaneous. They not only do they not drop anything, do they increase the tempo of maintenance? Do they increase anything either?
Well, basically they are doing
like your routine checks and stuff. Your checks and stuff.
No, they are doing the full maintenance, as in, the rule was that, after an aircraft had been operating for a full day, done a certain number of flights, you needed to break down its engines, open up, check everything.
And they're
doing everything. They're doing everything after all the flying, everything. There is no pause, no stop. Everything is carried on at the highest level of quality maintenance the whole way through.
Where were we? Let me just have a...
And
then you wonder why the engineers after the war, after the Falklands War, basically fall asleep for about 3 days. And the Royal Navy, after the operations are over, basically is, we are no longer capable of air operations. Why not? All our air engineers are asleep.
Oh dear, it's funny, but it's very true.
I mean, it worked.
It did.
It worked very well.
RBG sorry, not RBG. My waifu has said, would having the Maltas give British aircraft industry a chance to keep domestic design and production instead of procuring US aircraft? Nothing can save the UK aircraft industry. It was gutted and killed by various successive UK governments by creating programs that were very inventive and produced fantastic design studies and prototypes, but were then cancelled with white papers before they could be bloody finished.
Admittedly, these carriers give some excuses. It might keep going
But
a
you're
bit
not.
longer.
You're realistically. So remember, the air wing of these carriers is going to be shrinking over time because jet size increases or aircraft size increases. Now there will be a period where all of a sudden you can get more. And that's where the Legacy Hornets, although at the time they wouldn't have been, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The F-18A, the F-18B sort of period. You're going to claw some of that back because you're going from a Phantom to a Hornet. But
you're just not
when you look at order sizes, the economy there is problematic because under the arrangement Dr. Clark has talked about, the sort of thing that I've always thought you're talking about, like 2 carrier air wings.
Yeah.
Maybe 1.
You have 2 carrier wings and probably a reserve one to sort of, so you have the capability. You have a reservist one.
Reserve / training.
Yeah, that sort of scenario. But one of the things I think might be interesting, and bear me out this, is if you have the longer term program, what you might have, especially with the F-18, etc., is by that point you might have the British buy into that program. So it's a joint program with the Americans. It's a joint Anglo-American naval strike fighter.
There's also another alternative that I'd like to put forward.
And that could be quite interesting. Okay, Fleet.
I'd say you don't have the British buy into the F-18 program. What you might get is if the British have 3 Maltas and are planning Malta replacements. So yeah, but no, 3 operable, as in they're looking to replace the 4 Maltas with 3 replacement carriers in the 90s. That is a lot more hulls than we had. That is a lot more Catabar hulls than we had in Europe in the 90s. If there's that many Catabar hulls, the French demand for the Eurofighter concept to be carrier capable, if the British are in the program, suddenly doesn't become quite so egregious a demand. If you're looking at a buyout that's going to be 3 RN carriers plus the aircraft for the French carrier, you're looking at...
The problem there isn't the French, the problem there is the Germans.
Yes.
And because the Germans are bound to determine that
design the airframe from the ground up to be a carrier airframe to make it commonality. So you'd have a far heavier, far tougher to build, far stronger airframe.
Far more expensive airframe.
Far more expensive airframe, far more difficult to maintain airframe than you need for most of the customers.
True.
What you're likely to see is a Franco-British Catabar aircraft Well, this is right on the
In a
heels of
nicest
things like
way,
Jaguar.
You're always
You may
suggesting
see
the
one-
British and French should work together. We never do.
Jack,
There
well,
may
Hey,
be
Jaguar
ones
worked out pretty well.
developed,
yeah,
but
no,
I don't
we just
see it
don't.
going very far.
We don't. The reason we don't is we fundamentally, and I've worked on these programs, is fundamentally we have a very different approach to how we manage things and how we expect.
You do,
And this is
yes.
why we speak very different languages, and this is why when everyone on paper says we should be able to work together, we never can. It just leads to acrimony and disaster. We've managed to do it sort of in a limited way on nuclear weapons, which is really strange. But that's because on nuclear weapons is the area where we come closest to each other. But when it comes to anything else, just look, the good example is the Horizon Frigate project. And that thing was between Britain, France, and Italy, and frankly, it should on paper have been easy enough to deliver. We all want an air warfare vessel, right? And it turns into an absolute disaster. What's the argument over? The British want something which can actually operate at long range from the UK. Because the British are worried about the South Atlantic, and the French and Italians are going, but why do you need to?
Simple. We
And
have
that-
a lot of territory to cover.
And the entire whole thing leads to basically you have the British end up with the Type 45, which is a Horizon frigate in a destroyer hull. And even then, the British government managed to muck that up. And the French build and the Italians build the Horizon frigates, which are lovely, but are not what the British needed. So again, with the joint aircraft, it would be a lovely idea, but I could guarantee you where it would go completely belly up. Whereas Britain and America, we might be very different, but we're usually far closer in what we want from our systems, and we talk a similar language enough that we can usually work out a way that we can both.
So
get
what I'm
enough-
hearing here is the
The-
Super Hornet.
The
Yeah,
other
yeah.
important point
Wait.
is that the U.S. has deep enough pockets that
Gone?
there's less. I'm trying to think how to say this.
less penny pinching and less and less dealing
Yes,
with the fact that the
We can sit here and Britain will say, "Hey, we need the system to be able to do X," and we'll go, "Okay, we can afford that. We'll just do that. Whatever."
So you
Like,
are probably
that-
right then. You are
Doesn't phase like the Pentagon's just like, "Okay, whatever, we'll do
it's
it."
an extra capability for the Americans that they don't mind having, and yeah. But also, there's the other problem fundamentally with when you're working with the French, which I have complete and utter respect for the French doing this. But the French are very focused on a French industry and defense industry and things going through the French industry side
which of course makes
and this
perfect
is a
logical
fun-
sense.
for them.
French.
But it makes it fundamentally very difficult for other nations to work with them on defense projects. Because whereas the Americans will tend to get the idea that we need to project share and need to actually be building some sections of it, and some of the money needs to go into the British economy as well, and which of course with the F-35 they did quite a good job of. Not perfect, but quite a good job of. The French don't really get that, and that's what leads to a lot of problems with the French, and that's what led to the problem with the Australian submarine program and all sorts of things. In that the French understanding of what was be satisfactory for the Australians of built in Australia, and the French understanding of what the Australians meant by built in Australia, were two very different things. And that's the question which no one really wanted to talk about. We talked about on Build Trumps a lot of time. People were going, well, yes, it can't really be that. It was literally that simple. The French were going, well, the only way we can make this work is to do more and more building of the actual subs in France. And then we can deliver it on price and on time. Which was true. But the Australians had understood that the submarines were going to be built in Australia. With French technology.
Which it turns out was
Which
not.
was very different.
I just got a quick question about the F and the Hornets. This
Mhm.
timeline
Which
then?
ones? Do you mean the Super Hornets or the
Yeah.
Legacy Hornets?
No, both of them. Isn't this the big age of the US air arms infighting with each other?
No,
The
no,
British
we're
would
past
have to
that.
deal with that.
We're
Well,
past
I
that
mean,
point.
so the nice thing about the Legacy Hornet and the Super Hornet is you're really only working with the United States Navy.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Air Force does not give a shit. They've got their own stuff.
They've got F-16, they don't care.
Um,
And again,
Frankly-
America has deep enough pockets to do that.
Well,
isn't
also
the
the United
whole-
States Navy just orders enough to begin with.
Yep.
And also, with the Hornet, the other advantage you might get is if it's an Anglo-British operation, then you might get the British buying into that rather than the Typhoon. And that would mean the Hornets would be procured by the Royal Air Force as well as the Navy.
That's actually that's brilliant. I like that. I
That's
like that
sad.
as a concept.
Because again, if that basically what we're saying is right then. So if you want would Britain have enough money and want to do both Typhoon and Hornet as the programs they're buying into at the same time?
No, probably not.
Yes,
And-
No,
but-
Super Hornet does
Hornet
Super
wins.
Hornet does the same job and more.
Like,
Yeah.
and you can see this because Super Hornet is operated as a land-based fighter by Switzerland, Austria. Like, I can think of a few other countries that
Also,
operate.
Legacy
this-
Hornet.
You
it's-
could end up with the Super Hornet having Meteor.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Jesus
Which-
Christ!
Though
That
you'd
could be
certainly end up with the British ones with that.
Yes.
I'm not sure the U.S. Navy would spring for it and it's a difference in.
Yeah.
There's. Okay, so to put this simply, a ramjet propelled missile turns differently than a rocket propelled missile. It's a bank to turn versus a skid to turn. It leads to different considerations in missile design. It leads to different probabilities of kill at different range bands against different targets, things like that. Now, it's also possible that the U.S. Navy goes, we'll just buy both. Meteor replaces AIM-54 and AMRAAM replaces Sparrow. And you end up with AMRAAM for a while Meteor's being developed, although Meteor being developed in, say, a joint venture between Raytheon and MBDA UK, or maybe MBDA UK doesn't even happen because they're much more in with the Americans. Though that I doubt. But you end up with something completely different. Or you just end up with the UK going, Meteor's great, but have you seen how cheap AMRAAM is? And sticks with AMRAAM and goes in on AIM-120D.
It depends. If Meteor is as British focused as it has been historically in terms of its development,
then you're likely to see the first thing where the US might go into it, maybe not.
I
But
think
you'd
it could
still
be
probably
like,
get the UK with it.
It's the which torpedo? It's the not Tigerfish, Spearfish torpedo, where
yes.
the U.S. Navy goes, we'd really like that, but when we're buying all the others, we're perfectly happy with them. But yeah, we do lust after this one bit of British kit, and it could well be the same with the Meteor. They go, we don't really, we're buying enough of ours that it's more sensible for us to have ours.
Basically,
But we're going to quite like the British kit on this occasion, because there are a few pieces of kit I've known from working with US officers and various times. There are a few pieces of kit they do sort of look at and go, we love that, but the business case for buying that is really weak when we've got what we've got.
Yeah, and to be honest, in the 1990s, from the U.S. perspective, there's not much of a reason to keep a missile like AIM-54 around.
yeah.
No.
Because holy crap, are you swatting everything away, even with AIM-120B or A? That's a viable threat. And the backfire force, lol, what's that? It can't fly.
Pretty much. I would.
And on top of that, you're seeing a exponential improvement in the air defense capability of the United States Navy in this period. You're having the first vestiges of CEC starting to appear in the 90s. You're to where like E2C Hawkeyes are able to do terminal guidance on SM-2ER, which isn't a very common missile for the VLS ships, and this was a VLS sort of missile only thing anyways on this end. But you're also seeing the Burke Horde appearing.
Haha! It's
And
us.
that's a huge deal. You're also seeing, this is the period where Burks and Tychos are commissioning in numbers, right? The VLS Tychos. So the U.S. Navy's sitting there going, okay, our missile threat's decreasing, and our ability to protect against missiles is increasing dramatically. And at the same time, you can count on 1 to 2 hands the number of countries that can stand up to a single carrier air wing.
And most of those are allies.
Yeah.
That's the real problem for the US Navy in that period. Most of the countries which could stand up to a carrier battle group are their allies.
Are allies, and they can't stand up to 2.
Yep.
By and large.
Yeah.
Like,
I would like to.
and like, and it's not like, oh no, they can stand up to 1. They might cause us some casualties. We'll send a second.
Yeah.
Then they cause none.
Yeah. I would
There's-
like.
There's like 2 countries that would cause casualties in this period. One of them would give them a really rockin' good fight. And they're allies.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think which countries you're including as the 2 that would cause trouble.
I
In
would
my,
like-
The ones with SSNs.
the only 2 are Britain and France. So I'm sitting there
Yeah,
going,
the ones with
Britain and
the
France.
ones with nuclear attack submarines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the only ones that can cause a problem.
Yeah.
And even then, send the 688 horde ahead of it. Like, that's the other thing. You've got the LA class horde. Like, that's the
cast
problem
Los
with the US
Angeles.
Navy in this period.
I think the Royal Navy might run out of torpedoes before they run out of targets.
Yeah, probably.
That's I mean, that's still the point to this day with the US attack subfleet. Now, they're really good, don't get me wrong, but, like, the US
fuck are they even
Navy,
doing?
by a wide factor, has more attack submarines than the rest of the world combined.
Yeah.
Nuclear attack subs.
Like,
Yeah.
we have them.
Like, it's not close.
What are we doing with them?
What
we
are we
have them.
doing with them? Laughing our asses off to victory.
If I can quickly, I'd like to end off this little tangent before we move on to other questions with just a quick jump forwards. By the 2020s, you're looking at a USN that's very, very happy because there's three new British carriers, one of which is in service at any time. That means there are 2 flight decks in Europe at any one time. Charles de Gaulle and one of the
In
British
this
carriers.
scenario, has there been a Falklands War?
No.
Probably.
Oh, Falklands War.
Probably
Oh, yes.
not.
It depends. We'll go with probably because
Oh,
that then
Falklands
gets...
War.
Yeah.
I heard full up.
Yeah, that's
war.
what I heard. That's what I heard as well.
So
yeah.
I went to the Soviets, and I'm like, probably not, because neither
Yeah,
side
not that.
really wanted to go at it.
Then, did the British have LHDs as well then, in this scenario?
I don't know if the funding can stretch that far.
Well, no, think about it, because without the Maltas, you wouldn't have had the Invincibles. So that means instead of designing Ocean, which was basically as she was an LPH commercial build version of an Invincible, you'd be designing from scratch, which means you might well buy an American LHD
A
LHD.
wasp.
or a version of that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
In that case, then USN planners are even
And
happier.
that also provides you a reason for dropping down to 3 carrier groups, because if you've got 3 LHDs, you're now maintaining at least a guaranteed carrier battle group and a guaranteed amphibious task group, which is based on a LHD loaded with a Royal Marine squadron plus reinforcements, so it's a full battle group.
Yeah,
And you'd effectively be using something like a wasp without having to worry about the fixed wing on it per se, unless you want to maintain the training for the RAF's Harriers
No.
to fly off. But the reality is, yeah, you're just going to use rotary wing and make the absolute max out of that flight deck because you got carriers.
yeah.
And an F-18 does a lot better of a job at putting ordnance down.
The really interesting thing you might get out of that is the Royal Navy might end up operating the Cobra.
No, I think they're going to jump straight to Apache.
The
Well,
Cobra's
no.
better designed for a marine environment.
Well,
And they have, yeah.
And
And
more
also,
importantly, the Whiskey Cobra or the Sierra Cobras, they just pack up better in this time period.
And
And you don't
More
have to pay
importantly-
for it.
more importantly than that fleet of oceans, there is another small issue, which is why the Royal Navy could go to Cobra.
Oh.
Think about it.
You use my full title, which means you want me to think about something in great detail.
Yeah.
Can I phone a friend?
Yes.
Help!
Who are you phoning?
Anybody!
Sorry, I've been booking train tickets.
Okay.
the
So
only
I
thing
get-
I can
you're
think of,
thinking about
the only thing
this
I can think of
timeline-
with Apache is like they've got a sketchy like accident record.
yes,
Largely
but it's
because
not
of
one.
how the U.S. Army loves to fly them. But
If the Royal Navy goes Cobra, and when does the British Army get the Apache?
Shit.
Late 1980s, isn't it?
Yes.
no,
What have you said yes? What have you said no? Which is it?
let me double check on that. But I'm fairly certain the Apache was not bought that early for the British. Let me double check. The first flight of the AH-1, the British AH-1, was 1998.
Fair enough.
Mhm.
So I stand corrected then. Oh, which means that they're going
But
to
they
be.
started looking at it in the 1980s. But
Yeah,
if the
they were,
Royal
they
Navy,
were looking at it, but yeah.
if the Royal Navy's got into the Cobra in the late 1980s, then which way is the British Army going to go? Are they going to go, well, we want the Apache, or is the British government going to go, no, you're getting more Cobras?
I still think the Army's going to be able to make the case for the Apache. I'm still.
I don't know that. I don't know that
It
they
does,
would.
so, if we think about this compared to the version of the Cobra that they're going to be able to get at the time, there are benefits to the Apache, but they're not as great as you would think. And the Cobra is a lot cheaper.
And the Cobra could be being built by Augusta Westland by that point already, and you could already have the deal in place that the Cobra could be the models will be built in the UK by Augusta Westland.
And of course,
So you
being
don't have to renegotiate that deal for an Apache.
being Augusta Westland, they will tinker with it because that's what they bloody do.
Yes. And by the way, that program could also be the death knell of the Harrier in the Royal Air Forces service, because
Yeah.
if that could be something which is pushed through more earlier. The other interesting thing is that could affect the Lynx program, because you have to remember the Royal Navy, Royal Marines basically operate some Lynxes as gunships because they don't rely on getting them from the other services, and they wouldn't need to. So that, I mean, the Lynx fleet could concentrate more on troop transport, reconnaissance,
Which they're very good
basically
at.
being the British, basically being the British equivalent of the Kiowas, and
I'd argue Lynx is
doing
more the British equivalent of the... I'd argue that Lynx is more British Black Hawk.
No, it's not.
Nope.
It's
No.
a much smaller aircraft.
Would Puma then be the equivalent to Black Hawk for the art for the?
No.
No, the Brits
No.
don't really operate a true equivalent to Black Hawk until
Right.
you start looking at the current program to replace Puma.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Blackhawk, like you don't realize the scale of a Blackhawk.
No.
They're just big.
Basically, the nearest thing we've got in an envelope, but it's a very different aircraft, is the Merlin. But they're very different aircrafts and very different operating capabilities, so you really don't want to compare the two.
Fair enough.
Depending on the configuration of the Black Hawk, you can fit 2 British Army rifle sections and all their kit in a Black Hawk.
Wow, that's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
It's more the British Army rifle section is about 20% smaller than the U.S. Army equivalent.
Fair enough.
But the Black Hawk's designed around transporting a squad plus like another team, so you can, with 4 aircraft, lift an entire U.S. Army rifle platoon, which would include the weapons section, the platoon HQ,
Fair enough. Okay, that makes sense. I understand that now.
with 4 aircraft. So,
And the most
There-
I've seen crammed into a Merlin is roughly 40. It was
Right.
not comfortable.
That's a lot of blokes.
yeah, the Merlin is much. So the Merlin sits in between something like the Black Hawk and the CH-53.
It makes sense for Britain. It doesn't make sense
Yeah.
for America because they have the CH-53 and they have the Black Hawk. That's the thing.
And The Marine
It's
Corps
what you
was
usually
running around
find-
with the Frog
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
CMV or the
Yeah.
CV-20.
Um,
V-22. So many different versions.
Yeah, I get it. We get it. The crash machine. We get it.
That's actually the
Look,
CH-53.
I'm specifically avoiding mentioning the cyclic that there is someone who keeps commenting on all my videos whenever I talk about modern carrier design, etc., and modern carrier programs, that the CV-22 should be converted into the Airborne Early Warning, ASW, and Troop Transport Everything aircraft, because it's the perfect aircraft for modern carriers to do that role.
I'm going
Because
to.
I don't
Fucking
want
what?
to go to my comment
What?
section and start demolishing this poor person.
What?
What?
There are some of those roles where it works fine.
My God, he's been corrupted.
However, and this is a big however, it can't do all of them.
Oh, I would love to see it try and do an anti-submarine warfare.
It's not designed to hover for that long. Like,
No,
to
but you don't
utilize
understand.
a dipping sonar. It's just
They
not
spin.
designed for it.
And the actual
You
scenario
can
was
design a
this.
tilt rotor to do
It's
this,
high
but
altitude to do airborne early warning. That would be great. And also going, it can't hover.
well, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to hover. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. That was specifically what one commenter wrote.
I just.
Wait.
I love it.
Wait. Hover and do airborne early warning?
That is
High
not.
altitude.
No.
Sounds like a good way to blow up.
Well, why are you hovering to do AEW?
Oh, cyclic. I said I
I'm
don't
sorry.
wish to
I'm
watch you
sorry,
once
but
again.
at that point, if that's what you want, we have a thing called
Just
a
use a
fucking
fucking
balloon.
balloon.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Internal screaming intensifies. Just gah.
Welcome to all of us. This is our life now. Still, at least it's not as bad as it was a few days ago, eh, Dr. Clark? Remember that?
Oh, which one?
Don't mention it. Don't say the name. Do not say the name. But yes, that.
Anyways, moving on swiftly.
Yeah. So
Or as swiftly as ever we do.
I'd just like to round out finally what I was going to say, which is USN. Basically, the USN's very happy because it basically doesn't have to keep carriers in Europe. It can just have all of its.
I mean, we're still
super carriers in
gonna.
the Pacific.
So fleet.
Because
fleet,
fuck
fleet,
you.
Fleet. That's no. Like, you're putting a modern context that doesn't really even apply right now to something 30 years ago.
The USN probably at that point.
No, I said, like, if like I said when I started this, before we got into the whole discussion about aircraft, that, like, say, by the 2020s, you're looking at
But we're still gonna.
We're still going to.
Like,
Yeah. You know, what you might
do we
find-
necessarily have to? No. Are we going to? Yes.
The ability
The interesting
to
thing is going
put.
to be is US logistics in Europe, because if the British are operating the Cobra and the Seahawk and the Hornet, and they are basically probably built again have done some sort of version where they're doing maintenance at home, it could be a lot of their naval logistics in Europe is run through the UK.
Yeah.
That would be interesting, because there could be a lot of US logistics support done through the UK, in which case the UK might have kept some of its larger dry docks especially keep going, etc., and maybe upgrade and maintained, and US carriers, etc., when they have problems in Europe, could well end up in UK dry
Or
docks.
at least the big deck amphibs.
Yes, and well, especially
They're
if the
going to
British
be around the same
have
size
got-
as the Maltas.
if the British have got the Wasps or something similar to that, then I could see the Americans very much doing joint training and joint operations with those things, because one of the other interesting things would be, would the British get into the LCAC program, the Landing Craft Air Cushioning program, if they got the LHDs?
Probably. Or we'd probably build something ourselves.
Their own LSU program, which
Maybe,
is fairly
maybe not.
advanced, so I'd say probably
Yeah.
not. The fact is, the British little hovercraft could become even more attractive to the US than they are now. Because the Americans like their big hovercraft, but I have met a few of their Marine Raiders who would really do covet the smaller hovercraft the Royal Navy have.
Yeah, that's going to be more on the Special Forces side, though, for that.
That's the thing. If they're operating together more often, if they're operating for a similar piece and they see the kit, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Marine Recon, but probably Special Forces side might end up with a couple of the Griffins going, yeah, we have scenarios where we can use these.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about your budget coming out of SOCOM.
We definitely didn't invent these scenarios to get these.
No. It's not because they're really cool. No.
Back to the carrier side of things here, Fleet. Even with the likely building scenarios for the plan, the U.S. is still going to keep at minimum, not including the carrier and RCOH, at minimum 2 to 3 carriers in Atlantic Fleet. Which, okay, that's 4 of the fleet of super carriers.
Which is a hell of a statement.
Out of a planned thing of 12?
That's an even more hell of a statement.
The reason for that is simple. The U.S.'s commitment to NATO is its commitment to NATO. The U.S. Navy takes seriously the ability to project a 2-carrier strike force to wherever they need to be able to fight a high-end naval war, or what they view as the higher end of naval war. Because of the capability it allows you to do. And the pain it allows you to inflict.
The other thing is that, like, geopolitically, sure, there's other flight decks in Europe, but
they're not American flight decks.
Yes. And while that's not, like, physically, that's not a tremendous difference.
Especially considering that...
Politically, that's a tremendous difference.
Yeah.
And geopolitically, you've still got the whole nastiness in the Middle East.
Yes. Like, you're going, like...
Yeah, you've
and
got all those...
And that's been going for a very long time.
I think the more interesting thing you get, I don't think you get the American withdrawal from the... But I think especially you have the British having fleet carriers all that time, and probably the French still having 1, maybe having 2. Depends on what they've done.
The French might try to get another one if the British still have them, because fuck you.
But the thing is, what you probably get is Strike Fleet Atlantic. Could be a rotating command where the Americans hold it 2 terms in a row and then the British hold it for 1 term. Or something, especially as the French keep going in and out of NATO. That could be the agreement. But also, you could get regular exercises almost every year where those carrier groups form up as a combined force and exercise. And that would be really interesting to seeing what would come out of that.
The other thing is, in the Middle Eastern unpleasantness, what you're likely to see is British carriers taking up Station 2, helping to reduce the wear and tear on the U.S. carrier force and escort force and things like that. Because if the Brits are looking at keeping an LHD and 3 carriers, right?
Well, no,
they need more escorts.
LHDs. You'd have to have at least 3 LHDs. So they probably replace Fearless. The thing is, I think they probably replace they'd probably do Albion. They probably do an Ocean class that replaces Fearless and Intrepid, as well as provides the Ocean equivalent.
Yeah. So
that would make sense what the British are looking at the time. If they've got the big carriers, then they need to. So do you end up with the British having 3 fleet carriers and 3 LHDs?
Yeah, and in that case, guess what? And this is something Dr. Clark knows I will hammer until the nail is through the Earth's core. You got to plan on your task groups. What do your task groups need for escort? Right now, the RN doesn't have that.
That's because various governments have cut, the joy of the thing. And that's the thing. If you have the ships ongoing, it's far more difficult for them to cut. To go,
exactly.
Right, the world's going to be peaceful, so we don't need 12 air defense destroyers. We can get by with just 6.
Not if you're looking at not if you're looking at this scenario.
We don't need to buy 24 Type 23 frigates. We can get by with 16, and then we can sell off 3.
And we can build them to 18-year service lives.
Yes, and then they're going to serve. Yeah, it's,
and then we wonder why we're having to retire them instead of rebuild them, because there's not a lot left to rebuild on some of these.
What are you talking about?
The poor ships.
Look, what you need to understand, okay, is that rust holes and enough paint is basically the same thing as structural steel.
Yeah, Narwhal, they are not the light carriers of the modern era. They are completely
Basically
different
the same
ships.
thing.
Well, right. So with that,
The light carriers of the modern era are things like Cavour, things like Charles de Gaulle, right? Those are the light carriers of the modern era.
or
Or the Invincibles were as well.
yeah. In
In
fact,
tonnage scenarios, they do fit in the light carrier category.
honestly, you
Because
could
I was
just-
having this discussion with someone the other day who's going to go, no, the US Navy operates baby carriers. And I went, no, baby carriers are roughly 20 to 30,000 tons. Your LHDs are 40,000 tons plus, mate. There is nothing baby about them.
Yeah,
Goddamn
in
fucking
tonnage, yes, but they are highly optimized to putting ground forces ashore.
Yes, they are very much amphibious warfare. But this was my point when someone was trying to go,
Yeah.
no, they're baby carriers.
Oh no, I'm responding to
No, no.
Narwhal.
Yeah.
exactly.
I didn't think you were agreeing that they were baby
Yeah,
carriers.
they are not optimized. Even like the America and Tripoli, which are the most flight deck optimized of the U.S. Navy's big deck amphibs, they are not optimized to fixed wing operations.
Nope.
They are optimized to rotary wing to do air assault operations with ground troops. Yes, RBG. It is. But however, it's also a Catobar carrier. That's something you need to keep in mind. For a Catobar carrier, Charles de Gaulle is a light carrier. Just flatly.
I mean, I'd argue.
Again, remember-
I'd argue she's just a carrier,
please-
and then you've got super
please
carriers.
don't-
No,
Because-
she's not.
No, the reason she's a light fleet carrier on the fleet carrier, please note, before anyone starts thinking it's a critique of France, you have to remember the French government were able to build a bigger carrier, but because they were having an argument with the yard which had the biggest facility, they went to a smaller yard that had never done it before and had them build a carrier, and so they didn't build a carrier up to the full size they could. And this is why she can only operate less than 50 aircraft and all these sort of things, which is why in modern terminology, and I did a whole video about this, she really does fit into the light fleet carrier bracket, but it's literally because of the compromises forced in by the French government, because honestly, once you're building a nuclear carrier, etc., to scale it up to have been a bit bigger would have been an incredibly easy feat if they'd taken the design and stuck it in that and built it in that bigger yard. So this is she is what she is because of the actual disagreement was the political party which was in charge of France at the time had a dispute over a dinner menu with
Welcome to
the
France.
person who ran.
Yep, that's France for you.
Apparently they insulted them because the dinner they were hosting a dinner for them, etc., and the menu wasn't what they thought it was going to be, and that was insulting to them, and that then led to an ongoing feud which escalated in tit-for-tat maneuvers and then led to that scenario. That's the story I was told by a French naval architect, and I realise that might not be the official history, but seeing as he was a French naval architect who worked for several firms in France and the French government in that time period, I'm gonna trust what he was saying.
Yeah, I'll believe it.
So,
Like, that
RBG.
is so aggressive.
What I would say is, I tend to not make the distinction that Dr. Clark does with light fleet and light. I'm not going to argue with him on that distinction. I just don't tend to make that distinction. What I would say in the modern scenario is you're far, in my opinion, you're better to distinguish the aircraft launching method. So Charles de Gaulle is a Catobar light carrier. Cavour is a Stovall light carrier. Because that's where the real distinction in my mind, and I'm not saying he's wrong, but in my mind, That's where the real distinction in capability lies.
Not a bad shout, that.
Kavor is a less capable light carrier, even if somehow you made her Ketobar, but you really can't at that size with modern aircraft and get anything out of it. But realistically, when you're looking at a Ketobar carrier, 45 to 50,000 tons is about as light as you can go and still get a reasonable capability, conventional or nuclear. Yes, I'm aware the Midways did X, Y, and Z, but the thing with the Midways is you got to remember a lot of their weight was thrown into useless stuff by the end of their lives, and they weren't efficient carriers in that refit.
You also remember aircraft have grown a lot bigger, a lot heavier. They have they have different operating speeds. It's the aircraft you're dealing with are not the aircraft of that era.
Yeah, and now I will say F-35 Charlie is around the same size and weight as an F4 as a naval F4 Phantom. So you get into that. But now you got to look at the support aircraft. Are you carrying AEWC aircraft? Do you want to maintain a reasonable amount of helicopters? Do you want carrier onboard delivery aircraft? If you're doing a Ketobar carrier, that's all stuff you got to consider. This is, France does that with Charles de Gaulle. Well, not the carrier onboard delivery, although they can land and launch the US ones. It does that in very limited capacity. But that's the trade-off you make when you get a light carrier. If you want to add more capability, you have to reduce capacity quite a lot.
What I would, is I think we've pretty much rounded that out. That's got one of the longer tangents we've ever done.
We do
It
like
wasn't
to
a
have
tangent,
more.
it was an answer to the question.
True, but it really spiraled. Now then, moving on, Lazy Author asks, if somewhere, somehow, in the 1910s, a wonder material is discovered that can be used to make very light and very small batteries, but with very high energy density, would this cause a change in aircraft design, especially in naval aviation, considering that electric motors are smaller and lighter than piston engines? Well now, isn't that a pickle?
Where is this?
Does it change things? Yes. Am I smart enough to speculate on how and why?
I'll
Not
just
really.
link it.
What was the question?
It's here. Message link. There we go. Boom.
Oh, I found it.
Obviously you see tremendous change. I don't.
So I would say the
Aircraft are
problem
always
is with
interesting
this
pickle.
is this changes so much
Yep.
that it's not a question that one can easily answer.
We need,
Like
we need to know the specifics of exactly what these batteries are capable of, because then we can
Not even that. If this is 1910. This is very, very early in the maturation of the internal combustion engine.
Yep, like that.
And
the knock-on
what
effects
you
here are
do with
tremendous.
that, and what that also would have to do for electric motors and things like that, this spirals out of our ability to answer.
Let's be honest, the whole idea of having electric ships becomes very different. The electric, like the Lexington class, etc. Using electricity, generating electricity, and using that to power the engines, or using that to power the systems which drive the propellers, becomes very different, because suddenly those batteries become a very useful source of backup power in emergency and might keep your ship going even if you have trouble with your engines and all those things.
And potentially a source of surge power.
Yes, and it's going to change a lot, and it might even, let's be honest, considering depending on what material you're dealing with it, you're also going to have to develop electric and power mains, all sorts of systems to supply to run around the ship, and there's all sorts of advanced electrical infrastructure you're going to have to develop to take advantage of it. Just having the power source is not going to be, the power storage system is not going to be enough. You're going to have power sources that can actually charge it up. You're going to have the ability to organize that power and maintain it around the ship. That's a whole infrastructure you have to build.
Diesel
And that's
boats
a very
forever.
expensive aircraft.
There's some very interesting knock-ons there too. Like what's this do to the, your submarine fleets are.
Well, the fact is,
A diesel boat becomes significantly more useful.
Yes, and before you even get into that, we've got that. If you consider the existing technology at the time, is someone going to try and use the electric power as a propellant? Are they going to try and work on a Gauss gun? Probably not a rail gun. That's definitely far too.
But like coil guns and that kind of thing.
But coil guns, as in Gauss guns, that's something which the idea was around at the time, but they didn't have the ability to store the power necessary to do it.
Yeah, if you have that, and then you spend a few decades iterating on it.
HMS
That's the other point about
coil guns.
This question is that it's so far back in time that everything's iterated and iterated and iterated and iterated.
But you are dealing with a very different world by 1930, let alone by 1915.
It's far too difficult to actually. But
It would be fascinating to dig into. I do not have the
nor do I.
mental capacity to do that.
I think we need there's someone called Runon on my channel who's an electrician, and I'd say before we went into this, we'd probably need them here.
Yes, most likely. I'll park that for ramblings in the future, and I'll come back to that.
I'm now going to wander off and get some food because I've just been messaged that there is food available for me.
Fair enough. Lovely to see you, Dr. Clark, as always.
If I'm still rambling away when I finish food, I will pop back in and say hello to everyone. It's been always a pleasure to be here.
As you
And
always a
please
pleasure having you.
avoid concept and discussion of the battle at Carrier. You do not need to go there. No one needs to go into that particular stress ball, and no one needs to give Cyclic that amount of nightmares.
No, and
Okay.
Hopefully they've got some wonderful battle
Be
carrier
nice to my
designs.
friends,
No.
Cyclic, okay? Be nice to them.
So what you're telling me is
I'm
that we
nice.
convert HMS Renown into an helicopter carrier.
No, please stop. Anyway, moving swiftly on.
As we're saying.
Moe Raifu. Raifu?
Why-
Waifu?
You just can't get words right
I
today, can you,
can't.
Fleet?
No, I can't. Well, what about the Suez Crisis if Britain has four
That's going back to the
Maltas?
previous question, sort of thing, where you were discussing.
Yeah, but
all the
it's
You're
not-
still going to get the same response out of the U.S., except you're going to start seeing Atlantic Fleet mobilizing much harder.
It depends if
Yep.
it depends
And
if Britain
really,
moves
you're not
quickly enough.
I don't think you're changing too much.
Basically,
The other thing here is it ultimately, if the Brits decide to continue to push it, it's only going to end far worse for the Brits and the French.
You may
Because
change some
SAC
of the
exists, and this is the 1950s.
and SAC are calling
The
shots.
U.S. idea of fighting a war
is
heavily
mushroom clouds.
involves the limitless power of the friendly atom.
Like the idea of a limited war.
is not a thing in the U.S.
Yep.
mindset.
Like, we have this thing. We are going to use this thing. Damn it.
It's not even we have it, we're going to use it. It minimizes our casualties.
Yep, which it does. Why wouldn't we?
Mm-hmm. Wait. Oh yes. Your typical gunner officer asked, would you count the number of VLS as equal to the main gun sizes or gun numbers during the Dreadnought and Battleship era? AKA, can we classify...
So let me explain this, because it comes with a lot of caveats. There is a concept called the Battle Force Missile. Okay? What the Battle Force Missile, or its equivalent, is something like an Aster 30, an SM2, an SM6, an SM3, Tomahawk, VLA, Mark 48, its equivalent. It is not something like Evolved Sea Sparrow, CAM, or Sea Scepter, Aster 15. rolling airframe missile, right? And most of the weapons carried by carrier aircraft count, except something like a Sidewinder is debatable whether that counts or not. But most of what an aircraft would carry into combat counts. So yes, there are concepts for counting this up. It's not as simple as counting VLS, because a Mark 41 cell, to use the US Navy's, can be configured to carry a Battle Force missile or 4 ESSM, which aren't Battle Force missiles. They're predominantly used for ship self-defense rather than task force actions, that sort of deal, or task group actions. And there's even ways of counting up a carrier's potential. That's generally going to be done over 3-day operations, stuff like that. To get into the ability that carriers have to just keep punching, right? And if they need to reload, they can retire briefly overnight, reload at night, come back again during the day. Just cycle in and out and just turn into Mike Tyson. They're the naval equivalent of Mike Tyson if you have them set up right. But so there are ways of counting them. It's kind of hilarious when you do these counts, and you sit down and you look at them. Phoenix here on this Discord, Phoenix JZ has done this. It's rather eye-opening when you sit down and you do this and you look at it, the difference in firepower between various navies. And it really, when you do this, it really points out why the U.S. Navy centers itself around its carriers. I wish I could easily find it on his Twitter. I hope somebody in chat can, or if he's even here to post it. I don't know if he is or not. But it's hilarious just how much the U.S. Navy changes from when you just look at everything but the carriers combined to then add the carriers into it.
It's fucking nuts.
And it takes the U.S. Navy from ahead of the Chinese Navy, rather reasonably, to how's the grass smell, little man?
Yep.
I hope everybody in chat knows the clip.
Tell me
I'm
how the
referencing.
grass tastes, little man. Bang!
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good one.
Because that's what it turns the U.S. Navy into. It's something like 7 times or more the firepower of the People's Liberation Army Navy. Which really should just be the People's Liberation Navy. Again, gotta love translation dumbness. So...
Oh, here's an interesting question, actually. Your typical gunnery officer asks, would you rather have M18 TDs in large numbers instead of M10s in France in 1944?
No, the M10s.
In Normandy, the M10s handedly. Because
Why?
of the extra small arms protection.
Oh.
Well,
Yeah.
The M18 doesn't get you,
Like,
its
if I'm
extra
a-
mobility doesn't get you anything. It's only going to get more people killed. There was a unit that flat out mutinied to keep their M10s.
Wow. Was in flat out mutinied.
They
Yep.
refused to accept the M18s, and they got to keep their M10s.
Yep.
Because, if I remember correctly, especially around Normandy, the M10s were essentially used as an American version of Stokes at times. Where it was, they
I mean,
could
that was
take
the
low-level
whole.
anti-tank fire.
They were intended for that almost from the jump. They are a gun for dealing with things what need a gun. Whatever that thing may be it on tanks, be it just a random fortified position.
Well, they weren't
big gun is big
intended
gun.
for that, but
They
because they
were used for that.
because they used that 3-inch gun, they were more than capable of it.
Wasn't that the 3-inch on the M10 is a more anti-tank focused weapon, but the 3-inch on the M18 is a slightly longer, more anti-armor.
No,
focused.
they're effectively the same gun.
Oh, fair enough. So, because if I remember correctly, that gun actually does have a HE shell with a useful load.
Yep.
Yes, it's the gun that would go on the 76mm armed Sherman. It's the same gun.
Like, speaking of, actually, like, there's a lot of talk about, the 76mm Shermans didn't have HE worth a damn. I'm like, no, please stop.
I
do you
will
see
refer
that?
you to something I believe is penned in Ground Vehicles talk from Schwartzritter on that. But the 76mm HE shell was more than fine. More than adequate. Like, it's not as good of an HE shell as the 105 Sherman. Duh.
Really?
That's not
You don't
so-
say.
who would've- who would've
Wow,
guessed?
what a shock.
It's effectively a very similar HE to the regular 75.
Now, does
Which,
that
by the
mean
way,
you didn't?
the quote-unquote 76 and the 75, same bore diameter.
You would get bitching in theater, but bitching in theater from random dumbass private first class.
There's
Whatever the
nothing
hell.
more. Soldiers love nothing more than to complain.
Yes.
This is nothing new.
yes.
I can tell you right now, me and my coworkers love nothing more to complain. We still
Yep.
get our jobs done.
Yep.
Like,
The
it doesn't
a
really
lot-
matter what field you're in.
A lot of these get a fair amount of that bitching based on nothing, smoke and mirrors, ends up entrenched in popular culture after the war. But that doesn't change the fact that it's bitching based on absolutely nothing.
Makes sense.
Now,
Also, you're-
the one
you're more
thing that
happy
is
than
true
you
is
get.
the 37mm HE, bad.
Isn't that why
Really?
Isn't
But really, that shouldn't surprise anyone.
yeah? Isn't
Really?
Isn't that why Stewart started carrying a lot of canister?
It's why canister was designed in the first place.
Yes.
But it's also why Chaffee went to a 75.
Makes sense.
There were experiments with 75mm canister, but the problem there is just effective range. You can just do more with HE. Like, it's not worth sacrificing
You-
shells in the
yeah.
rack.
So canister did exist for it. It just wasn't normally carried. You would see canister for the 90mm. That really wouldn't come back until Vietnam, and even then, it wasn't true canister. It was a flechette. Canisters stayed around, and/or flechette. They're same
Because
effect.
big shotguns are fucking cool.
No, it's because they're useful. If you're fighting in restricted terrain, urban, or
Okay, yeah, that would- that makes
forest,
sense.
or jungle, and you don't have a precise idea of where the where enemy infantry is, but you know they're in that clump of bushes, and that clump of bushes is inside 500 meters from you, or they're in that house, and that house is inside 500 meters from you. Well,
You
you
can
have
make
a
that-
one ticket to remove them.
And they're gonna have a real bad time.
They're not going to be a problem anymore.
That's
Now, you're probably going to dump whatever round you have in the barrel at them first,
yeah.
load the intended round, and fire that. Not every country keeps a round constantly in the breach, but a fair number do, and so it's generally a fire, i.e. dump what's in the barrel at them and then load the intended round. It would have been useless in Normandy. Peanut.
What would have been?
The
If the US had,
T95/T28.
Yeah, no, useless.
Yeah,
It's not a good concept of a vehicle.
No.
None of that stuff is.
No, it's built for one job, and the job was obsolete even before it left the bloody production line. Because everyone expected that the Siegfried line was going to be a hell to break through, and then they just rolled right over it.
Okay, Mo, with that question there's no point. Up until very recently, Threat Nation's ability, so I'm going to speak from the US's perspective here. Threat Nation's capability to intercept sea skimmers was aspirational, shall we put it? So you didn't need many. And also, the US had a VLS launched anti-ship missile that used the Harpoon Seeker. And yes, I'm aware of the GAO reports. I think I've been over them before in this. The GAO was trying to conceptualize TASM as a sniper rifle, and the Navy was like, artillery battery, go burr. But because you fire an anti-ship missile salvo as a salvo, they're not individual sniper shots. The U.S. Navy had a good chunk of TASMs, and that was eventually a VLS missile. It was one of the key roles of sprue cans.
VLS TASM? That sounds hilariously effective. I'm not joking, that sounds bloody devastating.
It would have been for the Soviets because it flew low enough to have, for their air defense systems, even something like Naval Tor, to only have a very marginal intercept capability. Naval Tor probably could have thinned the herd, but only the Udaloys had it outside of Kishitsov. Because at this point, the later Kirovs weren't around. And even then, you don't defend a task force or task group with point defense missiles. So it would have been a really bad day for the Soviets. And it's hitting you with a 1,000-pound warhead and however much fuel is remaining in the fuel tank. And
which is gonna hurt.
Soviet ships weren't all that big, by the way. So you had no need for a VLS launched Harpoon, and come the 1990s, TASM was retired not because it was a bad missile. I mean, it had its problems relative to the 90s and what you could start doing in the mid-90s when it was retired, but it was retired because it was surplus to requirements. There was nobody that required it to remain in the arsenal. Remember that whole thing Dr. Clark and I were talking about, how the U.S. Navy sort of left their Mike Tyson standing alone in the ring?
Yep.
I'm going to use the Mike Tyson reference again. That's the 1990s. There is nobody, and I mean nobody, that can stand up to the United States Navy. In the 1990s, in all honesty, you could assemble the world's combined navies. They couldn't do it. It's another 1946 scenario, except there's no Britain. There's no massed Royal Navy at the end of World War II.
Yeah.
In this scenario, and even the massed Royal Navy, it would have been a bloody fight, but it's only going one way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although it would have been
In 1946.
Although I will admit, the idea of both gun lines going toe to toe with each other is something that I wouldn't mind seeing.
They probably wouldn't end up going toe to toe.
I know, but let a man dream. All
This
right.
is 1946. The U.S. Navy's fielding air-launched anti-ship missiles.
In all seriousness, just a little aside, if you don't mind. In terms of battleships in 46, I mean, like, I know, air-launched missiles and all that, just humour me for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So, for the USM, we've got the Iowas, Sodaks, NoCals, 2 Alaskas, and the Standard's still knocking around.
The Alaskas aren't going to be in the battle line.
Oh, fair enough.
They're not. If we're fighting Britain,
They're cruisers.
the standards
Yeah,
are staying.
fair enough.
Standards are staying in the Pacific. They can't get them back through the Panama Canal.
No, I'm not assuming. I'm not saying this is a specific war or anything. It's just hypothetically, we're putting both battle lines against each other, and we're just spitballing it. I know it's not realistic. I'm just spitballing here. I don't want to know who wins or loses. I just want a rough comparison of what each side can bring to the table, because I know we can't bloody decide who wins because there's too many variables. So for the US, we're looking at all the fast battleships, all the surviving standards. For the UK, you're looking at KGVs, possibly Vanguard, some of the more refit QEs, and I don't know whether they bring in the Revengers. because the Revengers haven't had even half the upgrades some of the standards
Well,
have.
if they're bringing in the QEs, why wouldn't they bring in the R's? If you're really
Because
throwing
the moment you
everything
bring
you've
the
got,
R's, the U.S. Navy can set the battle line speed and decide whether or not they wish to engage.
Whereas if you don't
Oh
bring
no!
the
Well,
US
I'm thinking this from the perspective the U.S. Navy doesn't even bring the standards, but
They probably wouldn't. Like I said, they're
Yeah.
The second VJ Day +1, those ships are done. Like they are rebuilt.
and still
The
clapped out.
Navy knows that that's all they're bringing them. Like they're not rebuilt to a high enough stand. Like the ones that are rebuilt during the war are not rebuilt to a standard to continue after the war. Like they know they're going to the scrapyard immediately.
The only
Like I said,
exception,
they're not getting them through the Panama Canal.
only exceptions I would make for that are the 16-inch standards, the Colorados.
No.
No,
too slow.
like
They're
the
slow.
West Virginia, they're the ones that aren't getting back through the canal. The Navy is fucking done with them.
Yeah.
They keep them around for the war because they're in the Pacific and they're useful to have. But there's no reason to keep them.
They've had their moment.
And keep in
That
mind,
is
the
done.
U.S. Navy has 12 fast battleships that are all 16-inch gunned, all firing the Mark 8s.
And the RN can
Okay.
only answer that with 6 modern fast battleships, the KGVs and Vanguard. And then they've got to
And
make up the rest of their line with Renown and the QE.
You've got 6 Sodaks, if I'm correct, or was it 4?
4.
4. Okay, so it's 10.
Yeah, 2 NoCals. 2 NoCals, 4 Sodaks, and 4 Hours.
Yeah. I don't know where I got the 6 in my head. Maybe that was what was planned.
I think you might have collated the 2 Alaskas in there just by accident. Possibly.
No.
No, actually, I think Cyclic might be right there.
Yeah,
I might have transposed the plan. Whatever. It's still 10 ships, even with the RN just can't keep the line together if the USN just goes, all right, we're just going to sustain X speed.
Yeah, the USN can sustain 28 knots with all 10 of its ships. The RN just cannot.
What year is this in? Sorry, I get.
Literally 1946.
Sort of like 46.
1946. The Royal Navy's fucked.
Yep, I know.
Because
Yep.
our class are completely out of service. They're at the breakers. Most of the QEs are at the breakers. And the KG and aside from Anson and Duke of York, the rest of the KGVs have been demobilized. So they're
Yeah.
not actually seaworthy.
Yeah, but assume.
This would be a completely different scenario if the Lions
the
got
QEs
built,
aren't
but
actually sent to breakers just yet.
But
obviously,
the
because
Navy
it's
was taken
further.
apart
even then, they're
eventually.
not.
Yeah,
But they're not
they
going to
can't
exactly help
sustain the speed.
much.
Yeah, like if like we've deliberately kept the carriers out of this because it's just, well, I knew it was going to be a loss. I just wanted to just kind of spitball it just for curiosity's sake, if nothing else.
The other problem
47
for
is
the Royal Navy
46
here
is a
is
bad year for the Royal Navy.
the other problem here is if you end up with fleet actions, like the U.S. can provide heavy escort to its carriers very well. The RN has a problem with that.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
And as good as they are at
it's
the
just-
anti-shipping strikes, I don't think they're good enough to get past the USN.
No. Like the
Particularly a USN that has just spent quite a lot of time in combat dealing with
this problem.
800 aircraft raids.
And raids whose aircraft aren't raids of what are essentially the world's first guided anti-ship missile
Missiles.
attacks.
Hmm.
And no, I don't mean the
The-
Ahokas. The Ahokas are the cherry on top.
No, we're talking about the Bettys here.
Yeah, I know. This is the thing.
No, we're literally just talking about kamikazes in
Yes,
general.
no, that's. Yes, that's what I meant.
Oh, you said Betty.
Yes,
Whoops.
that's
Never- I mean, if a Betty kamikaze hits
There's-
its target, it's effective. But get in there.
There's also another problem that the Royal Navy has. The Baltimore class.
Oh, and the Des Moines. Don't forget the Des Moines.
Des Moines don't commission until 48.
Wow, I didn't realize they were quite as late as that.
Well,
yeah.
their construction was heavily slowed down.
it's like, war's over. We could slow down. Everybody go get drunk for 3 years. All right.
Yeah, as in time between launched and commissioned on Des Moines itself was 2 years, basically.
That's about right.
In fact, pretty much all of them.
But yet, the Baltimores are just sat there going, "We're just there."
Or a threat they're
Yeah,
only
all
can't
of
really deal with.
Baltimore's.
You'd also have You'd also have Oregon cities.
Which are basically
And then
just
you've got the Clevelands.
yeah. I mean, the Oregon City are basically just our Fleet Air Arms strike package be gone, basically. Because as Cyclic has said before, everyone likes to harp on about the Oregon City's guns, but as he said before, as long as you don't cycle them at the maximum rate of fire,
What are you? Fleet. That's not the Oregon City. The Oregon cities are just a further couple of Baltimores, basically.
oh, yeah, sorry, I'm
That's
getting
like
I'm
a
getting my
Baltimore.
US cruisers mixed up. Sorry,
You've got Cleveland's and the Fargos and such, which would also be
sorry, that's on me.
horrifying.
That's on me, getting my US cruisers mixed up. Sorry, guys. Ignore Fleet.
Like 1946, the U.S. Navy has just spent several years fighting this war. Like that's
And fighting, in terms of surface actions, a hell of a lot of cruiser actions. A hell of a lot of them.
the
And then you've got the Alaskas as well. And on the sort of anti-air cruiser side, do I need to start talking about the Junos and the remaining?
not
No,
really.
I
I
think
think
we
the
get
point's
it.
been made.
Basically, there is no force on Earth that can defeat the USN in 1945-46, even if all the rest of the world's navies come together.
But yeah, because what major navies are there at that point? The Royal Navy, and that's
About
independent
it.
fighting force.
Like by hull numbers, the next biggest is the RCN.
No.
Was it not? Sorry.
Because half of those whole numbers don't even frickin' count. the way they did their whole
Okay.
number count.
Good to know. I had seen that statistic bandied about somewhere. I stand corrected.
The next largest navy down from the Royal Navy was the Soviet Navy.
At this point, the
And
less
that was
well,
a-
the better.
Ocean of a gap.
So essentially, to simplify it, the USN's just finished building up its navy. The Royal Navy's just expended its entire navy. Because
Yeah.
there's not good condition in the Royal Navy at that point.
Yes, and
I'd say that's a pretty fair assessment. Like broad strokes. Anyhow,
I missed that. Sorry, I was looking up something.
why would they build? There's no reason for them to build more vessels.
well,
No, this isn't going off an alternative history scenario. This is just what the forces had at the time in 1946.
I remember Vanguard's essentially a scrapped parts battleship.
Yep.
What can we throw together fast enough?
So the U.S. ended the war. So VJ Day, right? Victory Japan Day. August 14th, 1945. The U.S. Navy had over 6,000 active vessels. 6,768 to be exact.
And what's that counting?
Surface warships, auxiliaries, amphibious ships, patrol ships, mine warfare ships, submarines, frigates, destroyers, cruisers, escort carriers, fleet carriers, battleships. What's going in frigates is DEs.
Okay.
This isn't counting like harbor patrol boat. And even if I eliminate the patrol category, right, which is going to include things like sub chasers, that's only bringing it down to like 5,560 something. Only. Now, by June 30th, 1946, right?
So
The U.S. Navy's down to 1,248 vessels.
So that's less than a year.
Yeah. That's 10 battleships, 15 fleet carriers, 10 escort carriers, 36 cruisers, 145 destroyers, 35 this time would have been DEs, 85 submarines, 112 mine warfare vessels, 119 patrol vessels, 275 amphibious vessels, 406 auxiliaries,
It's just staggering.
Yeah. The U.S. Navy would continue to trend down through to 1950 and then rapidly start rebuilding. 1954, it's up to 1,113 total vessels because of the Korean War. And it trends down again through the 60s, reaching a nadir in 64 of 859 vessels, and starts building back up slightly at about 69 or 1969 with, or no, 1968 with 933. But like I cannot stress enough just how staggeringly large the United States Navy was at the end of World War II.
I put an equivalent in for those who need it. The USN was in the same position the Royal Navy was in the at the end of the Napoleonic Wars.
And even with it downsizing, it retained that position all the way through the Cold War.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the Soviet Navy was a challenge, but not
It was a
threat to U.S. primacy of the seas.
It's we have to take this somewhat seriously, not this is
No.
actually going to be a problem.
They needed to take it completely seriously, But the Soviet Union could never supplant the United States Navy as
Yes.
the world's dominant navy.
Then
That is-
again, the Soviets
um,
weren't
yes.
aiming to do that either. That's one of the
Yeah,
things.
Yeah,
because
'cause
they
they
knew
knew they
it
could-
was impossible.
I think
When
if
you look
they
at their
thought-
writings,
if
Yeah.
they could have,
They
a-
would have.
mm,
no, they
Probably-
wouldn't.
they
The internal
thought about it.
politics
but
really would have kept that from happening.
What the Soviets did
Because
become
this-
is a very viable threat to the USN, and most importantly, a force that could exert near total control around their northern coast, which is what they considered the important
No.
bit.
No. They couldn't.
They could.
they could make us bleed if we tried.
They could put up a serious fight fleet. But remember what I said earlier about a position you don't want to be in is a carrier force is trying to out-attrit a land-based air force?
Uh huh.
The US Navy could do that to the Soviets up
They
in the
wouldn't
north.
like it, but they could do it.
Christ.
But
That's-
how
that's
would they
just
do that? Though?
All of
Because
the
the
carriers.
Soviet Air Force was fucking massive.
Yes,
It
but
was
the thing is,
massive, but they're not having to do that against the whole Soviet Air Force in this scenario, are they?
Yeah, because if the Cold War's gone hot, welcome to the
There's a
battle
huge
royale.
air fight in Central Europe.
Yeah, welcome to the shit show, motherfucker.
What the USN had to out-attrit were things like MiG-31, things like Flanker, things like the Backfires, and Fencers. And Tomcat with AIM-54 Phoenix is a hilarious combination against all of those. And before that, even the F-4 Phantoms, in the era where they're the predominant fighter. Because remember, the F-14 comes out before the Flanker does, by a large margin. Even in the era with the F-4 Phantom, it's not really a fight the Soviets can meaningfully handle. They can put up a better fight. They can certainly attempt to fight for the Norwegian and Greenland seas, but they are going to get rolled back.
I mean, just
It's
to give-
going to be a hard fight, but the United States Navy, and the reason I say the United States Navy here and not NATO is because realistically, when you look at the firepower difference, it's the U.S. Navy here. And when you look at what other navies were focusing at, like in the 80s, the French Navy was flying around with Crusaders as their primary fighter. Something only Sidewinder equipped. And the Royal Navy was thinking about its role in the Greenland and Norwegian seas of conducting ASW operations out in front of NATO forces, or conducting operations in support of the fight along the Norwegian coast under the screen of Strike Fleet Atlantic, which in this time period, the meaningful assets of Strike Fleet Atlantic are all flying the Stars and Stripes. This does lead to some very awkward potential scenarios if you're an Invincible class aircraft carrier, but I don't like to imagine kicking puppies, so because it's what that would have been. Friggin' Backfire regiment or division descends upon an Invincible, a sprue can, a Type 42, and some British frigates.
Ew.
That's effectively kicking a puppy just born.
I mean,
The Sea Darts might bag 2 missiles because of their rate of fire and their guidance characteristics. But the fight that would have happened up there, it would have been, one for the history books, but it would only end one way, and the Soviets would have been constantly getting kicked in the face backwards.
So for the Soviets, it was more of an interdiction campaign than a...
No, they wanted to try to fight for the coast of northern Norway around the North Cape. And the reason why they wanted to do this, and they'd really only seized that far, is to make it easier for their Air Force to operate in support of their Navy. The only way they had a chance in defending the Bastion, which was the primary goal here, was to preserve the Soviet Navy's capability to end the war as leverage, with the boomers, end the war on terms they wished, because they felt they could win the conventional side of the war and land in Europe. And they were pretty confident in that. And they were also fairly confident they could keep it conventional.
Yeah.
And you'll note, even with all of that, they still didn't attack. They weren't looking to attack.
Like, each side planned for a hypothetical conflict, but neither side wanted to initiate the hypothetical conflict because the losses would be less than the gains. Sorry, the losses would be more than what they gained.
It's not even that. Neither side conceived of themselves as the attacker, but conceived of the other as the invasion threat.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Always.
But back up to northern Norway, and I kind of wish I had Moo around for this, because this is like he's literally got a degree focused on studying this. But broadly, they wanted to cut the North Cape off of Norway to make it easier for their air forces to support both the backfires and the Soviet Navy. It was the only way they had a chance of defending their bastions against the US Navy on the surface. They had a whole different problem undersea.
Like, the Soviets have a lot of boats, but they what is it said about the Russian? I'm going to apply the whole thing about the Russian army to the Russian submarine fleet. The Soviets have a large and modern submarine fleet. However, the modern part ain't large, and the large part ain't modern. Basically, like, you've got the Sierras, you've got the Alphas.
Well,
you actually have some Akulas tooling around.
Yeah,
the
and
other
some Akulas as well. But
the other point, right, is define modern, because
the quote-unquote modern boats of this period are the Victor IIIs, the Sierras, and the Akulas, and the Kilos.
The technology gap there. Soviet cutting edge.
I would caution against that. That's a
we don't
rather.
Know how much we know about that is, yeah.
No, that's not the direction I'm taking. The direction I'm taking is the Sierras and the Akulas were considered absolutely on par with the 688Is.
Yes.
The Victor IIIs were considered on par by the USN at the time with the regular 688s. And there were a decent number of Victor IIIs.
And then, of course, you've got the Kilos, who can just be extremely quiet boys sitting.
That's okay. No.
Well,
that is a completely outmoded idea of subs, even for this time period. Okay. The Kilos, they were, for their time period, reasonable SSKs, but SSKs are not in this time period inherently quieter than a nuclear boat.
Oh.
Particularly in the high north.
Oh, I see. Go on, please. This is all new to me. Please, go on.
The comparison between nuclear boats and SSKs that for some reason people still apply, even though it's 50 years old as a comparison at this point. Literally half a century old, dates back to the 60s. Actually, that's almost 80 years. No, almost 60 years now. Math, I'm doing it live, help me. It's
like 660.
over 60 years old.
Yeah.
At this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, it does not apply in the 1980s, and it certainly does not apply today.
So nuke boats are now just as quiet, if not quieter, than SSKs.
They both can be just as quiet as each other.
How then?
Because you don't have to run your pumps on a nuclear boat with a proper reactor design. You can use adiabatic cooling and circulation. You're going to have a current because of the difference in temperature. You will have a natural cycling current. You don't have to run your pumps to move the water.
Yep.
That works.
As long as you design your reactor right, you don't need it. And that's been the case for, since this happened in the U.S. Navy. I don't know. I want to say on the permits.
Okay, forgive me for being a bit dumb here.
No, we'd rather have layman's questions because that means we can just debunk the myths. Like, fantastic. Let's do it.
So, if you can make the nuke boats quieter, and they're always getting quieter, then why don't diesel boats keep getting quieter and quieter and quieter?
Like I said, they both can be just as quiet as each other.
Yep. Your nuke boat. Yeah, they can be as quiet as each other, and the nuke boats. I mean, they're different.
Never have to charge batteries.
Yeah, never have to charge your batteries. They can just lurk, and just run around doing whatever until they run out of human food.
Yeah. Here's the thing: the reason that the Russians kept building diesel boats is that A, they were easier to build, and B, they could operate them from more ports. Because, as I'm sure some of you know, but in case you don't, to operate nuclear vessels, I don't know if this is the case in the Soviet Union, but it's definitely the case in the West, you need a nuclear certified port to operate those vessels. You can't just park them anywhere you like.
And maintenance is
you're the
bitch.
Soviets. You can base them anywhere you want because
Fair
you can
enough.
build the facilities you want.
Yeah,
That's not really a governmental consideration as long as they're willing to spend the money. The biggest deal here is sized. It's nuclear boats traditionally. There are some classes that are more than capable of doing this, one of which is vastly or very quickly, if it already hasn't, becoming the mainstay submarine of the United States Navy. Nuclear boats historically aren't able to operate as well in shallow waters. You generally can't ground them. Not that grounding your submarine is always a good idea, but in some cases with the right sediment on the bottom, it can be a viable tactic. Generally speaking, you cannot do that with a nuclear sub. Your water intakes are going to have problems if you're running that design of reactor and system, where your coolant that's isolated from the coolant that touches the reactor, gets sucked in the seawater. Conventional submarines are a lot easier to build small. And when you're in shallow water, being small matters a lot generally, unless you have some very, very, very sophisticated systems, which are not cheap. And if you are focused around the Baltic, the Black Sea, which, by the way, is the predominant theaters the Kilo is designed for. Was also designed to be capable of being the SSK for the Bastions. But it was primarily designed around those theaters, the more littoral theaters. They would go on to find that it's not ideal for those theaters, and this is where the Ladas as a design in the Soviet period came in, that we're now seeing the Russians having refreshed that design to use as a Kilo class replacement because they can't build enough nuclear boats to do what they need. So it's trade-offs. Generally speaking, in the modern period, if you can build a nuclear submarine, that's what you want to build. Because you can do something like the Virginia class and make a nuclear submarine that is very deadly in the open ocean and absolute terror in the shallows too. It'll be just as quiet. They both have fundamentally the same limitations on quieting. Now with proper reactor design, and have for 50 some odd years. So that's that paradigm is something that mostly dates to the 50s and 60s in terms of quietness. There are other reasons to build SSKs than quietness, chief among them cost, speed to build.
Some nations don't have the nuclear tech to do it.
That's the other thing. Nuclear submarines are some of the most complex vessels humanity creates. They are far more complex than the system going to the taking, astronauts to the moon again with Artemis. These things are not cheap, they're not easy.
Isn't it quite funny that after everything humanity went through to modernize its propulsion technologies and everything else, that the ultimate evolution of the submarine still, once again, is just steam driving a turbine?
I mean, that you can describe much of humanity's technology that way.
Yeah, the history of humanity is finding better ways to make things spin good, and unfortunately,
better ways to boil water generally. Yeah.
Either boil water or making things explode, because that's how a combustion is.
Amen.
Yeah, you.
So how do make spin?
You need.
How do spin?
You just need the kaboom, Rico.
You boil it down to that, and it's just. It is quite funny that some of the first.
Well, yeah, you just boiled it down.
Well done! Well done! Oh god, that was a good one, Cyclic.
You beat me to it.
Oh, that was good. Well
done.
Well done. I was just actually thinking while we were talking about this. Oh, bloody hell, what was I going to say? Something about...
Careful, don't hurt yourself.
Oh, charming. My brain's not...
He's once again lost his marbles.
My brain's not that broken. Look, there are two...
He had them.
Marble.
Look, there are still two brain cells in there, and when they bang together, that's when my thoughts finally collide, alright? So just give me a second, they'll bang together again.
We need to get the Large Hadron Collider going to see if we can get
I
lucky.
do want to apologize. We haven't been as good about getting through questions this time as we sometimes are.
To be fair,
I'd like to think that the commentary we're offering is good enough to make up for. Thank you very much, Simon.
Yeah.
We've only dropped by 1 or 2 numbers.
Yeah, but there actually have been...
People are still listening. So
yeah, we've
clearly
just been,
doing something
we've just been
right.
talking, so that I think the conversation must be of interest because questions have dried up. They're just letting us talk. There is one that I would like to talk
there's a
about,
few
which
earlier,
is
but
your
they were
typical
sort of
gunnery
skipped
officer,
over,
but this is the first one I could see, which is after the whole RN versus US question, which led to the whole tangent on the Soviet fleet that we've just been on. Would you refit the Hawaii or experiment with her as a missile cruiser? If you're going to do anything to the Alaskas, It's basically got to be missile cruiser or scrap, because keeping them as gun cruisers isn't worth it.
I'll be honest, with the benefit of hindsight, I wouldn't have done any of the missile cruiser conversions to begin with. I would have done new builds. They are very, very poor ships. The magazines for them are above the original main deck.
Oh Christ!
They what?
You don't mean? Bloody hell! That's a
They
disaster
are,
waiting to
because
happen.
there's no way to fit these missiles into the ship otherwise. They're too big. The ships weren't designed for them. You've got to design your bulkheading right. You've got to high. Like they're not good. They're not good ships. They were largely done as experiments. Long Beach was a dramatically better ship in every regard.
Even if I hate the cube.
Like, you know, people like to make fun of her leaning. You don't want to see an Albany trying to turn. Or an Albany and seas. You don't want to.
Now is that I don't want to see it or don't want to be on it in those conditions?
Yes.
Do not praise the Sea Cube. She's not praiseworthy. Well, as a cruiser she is, but that bloody superstructure can die in a hole.
Cracks neck, cracks knuckles, unlocks shoulder.
I will
I think I
stand.
just picked a fight fleet.
I will stand by that. The superstructure is shit. French pre-dreadnoughts look better.
They are
certainly
nice
an
looking
opinion.
out.
Oh, really?
I'm the Fleet
They're
of
nice looking out. I'll
Oceans.
give you.
Like, I'm the Fleet of Oceans. Look at my fucking profile picture.
Yes, we're all very aware.
We are aware that you
ABC,
have
you son of a bitch.
some minor brain damage in regards to seeing these floating pieces of junk as the pinnacle of human ingenuity, but it might be time to let go, fleet.
Let go. Let go. Never. I'll stick with my delusions until the end of time.
Look, all I'm gonna say, if you want a pre-dreadnought, look at the British no freeboard, because only cowards have freeboard.
I raise you the ocean-going monitors.
Oh Jesus!
Oh God,
I was
Cyclic,
afraid you were
no.
gonna say that.
Cyclic, no. We need some
Cyclic,
freeboard.
yes.
We need some
No, you
freeboard.
No, you don't. Take this sub bitch around the cave.
The thing is, no, he's not talking about the Civil War era ships, I think, and he's talking about the ones.
No, I'm aware.
The USN built in the 1880s and 1890s. Those things were interesting. Puritan. Like, look at that. Like, do you require freeboard? No. We do
Anything
not require...
called a monitor is just.
Good God, the USN monitors are just very, very silly.
I don't know, I'd say the British monitors, a number of those look pretty decent at least.
Right. The thing about the US monitors is the fact they thought they could use them as ocean-going warships.
Yes, and...
Well, ocean-going warships in the sense that they had to go in the ocean to get from New York to San Diego. This did not go well.
Yeah, but it's still like the USN plans to take them against the Royal Navy in the Atlantic. It's just like,
Only because it's all they had.
Like, remember, right?
Congress wouldn't let them build
Congress
what they
gives
wanted.
them money to build warships during the Civil War. And then, for the next 20 years, whenever the Navy goes to Congress and says, we would like some boats, please, Congress goes, fuck you, you have boats. What do you mean you need more money? We gave you money. Shut up. This is the reality of the US Navy.
And when they do give them money to build things, they specify that it basically has to be this. By listing maximum capabilities.
Yep, because they are more concerned with like we do not need that.
Even the USN
Says
even-
Congress, right?
Yeah.
We don't need that. We're not paying for that. We're not doing that.
Oh, look at Charlemagne. Isn't that just the prettiest pre-dreadnought you've ever seen?
You see,
That's even
Lady,
better.
I rate
Shut up,
you
guy. The
HMS
Dutch don't have
Hood
pre-dreadnoughts.
as
You can't talk.
HMS Hood, 1907.
Although I will, I mean, even when the USN was thrown a bone, the first capital ships they built were the Oregon class, and even then the freeboard is. It's
Doing
not.
1891 box over.
Yeah, 1891, sorry.
Cyclic, the Indiana class were just a bit like the freeboard's not all there yet. Bless them.
Yeah, they were also like heavily restricted to coastal stuff, anyways.
Yep.
I mean, if we
Like
want to
that's the
talk,
whole idea.
Like-
if we want to talk about the first proper USN pre-dreadnought, it's got to go to Iowa.
Yeah, that was the first one that they were actually allowed to fucking build to what they wanted.
And she is a very handsome-looking ship, I have to say. She's very, very good-looking.
She's not the worst.
And also, you've got that weird bit where the USN had the early heavy battery for a period on some. In fact, a lot of USN pre-dreadnoughts had the 8-inch secondaries.
Yes.
Which isn't something I understand, but
It was basically down to the fact that the
people are doing
USN
weird
had
shit at
a.
that point.
I think it was down to the fact that the USN had a good 4 and 5-inch gun, and they had a good, but they didn't have a 6-inch gun yet. So, for example, if you see in the ships that followed the Indiana, you start seeing the 5-inch come in, and then in the Illinois class, you see the 5-inch and 8-inch barrels dropped for the 6-inch gun. Then again, there's a period in late US pre-dreadnought construction where the 8-inch gun is just absent. Then it returns in the main class in the Virginias for double stack turrets, and then you finally round out with the last of the proper USN pre-dreadnoughts, which is the Connecticut class. The Mississippis don't count because they were designed under speculation and then had to be sold to the US so that the yard building them didn't go bust. And then, of course, they were eventually sold to the Greeks, but the Connecticut's were the final proper US pre-dreadnoughts.
Well, it's not just
We
one
all-
turret. It's two
We all know
turrets.
the best of the pre-dreadnoughts, though. Good old Agamemnon.
One on top of the other.
To tell you the truth, if I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm looking at Connecticut versus Agamemnon,
Well, you see,
they both have their stuff. So, for example, like the thing that Connecticut as a class has going for it is that it has the 412-inch. It also can put 4 8-inch on the broadside, and it can also put 6 7-inch on the broadside. So, at the rate, and normally that would cause splash difficulties, but because we're in the pre-dreadnought era, the ranges you're fighting at, that's not too much of a difficulty. So, you've got more hail of fire than... It's basically going to come down to, are the 9.2-inch guns of the British ship going to tell before the mixed 8 and 7-inch secondary battery of the US ship does? This is the thing. You're in that weird period where that is actually a calculation you have to weigh up. Typical Gunnery Officer asks, thoughts on stacked turrets of USN battleships at the time? You can see where
Everything I've heard is they weren't a good idea.
Yeah, you can see where the designers were coming from, but there's having a design principle, and then there's actually implementing it, and the implementation was utterly terrible.
Well,
the implementation wasn't good, and the other thing is that, like, it's good in theory, but now but then how do you fight the damn thing? Like,
yeah, that's the
big
issue,
problem.
isn't it? That's the big one.
The problem they run into is that the whole idea with them, well, one of the problems they run into, right? The whole idea with them is that they can share like hoists and that kind of thing, right? And what that effectively does is cuts your rate of fire for both turrets tremendously. It dramatically overcomplicates everything to do with your loading procedures, with your ammunition handling below decks. You can't fight them.
You actually can't fight them. They're really quite bad. For
Like
being-
you are effectively fighting one turret or the other, and you're still having to deal with the other one and all the mechanisms for it, and it's just, again, you can see where they were coming from, and the implementation was good considering what the idea was. The problem is that there is no way to do that well, if that makes any sense.
It was
Like-
essentially an equivalent to the Royal Navy's unrotated projectile launcher.
kind
It was,
of.
it was a good system, but just ran face first into reality.
Basically. Where were we? Moe Maifu asks, question, could the refitted Midway survive the typhoon that Halsey threw Third Fleet into? I assume he means once she's had all the shit piled onto her towards the end of her career.
Fuck knows.
Maybe,
I wouldn't
maybe
want
not.
to try it.
Probably. She is a 45,000 ton ship. That does
not-
count for something.
It's not going to be a fun time.
Yeah, everybody on board is going to want to kill you. So I hope you're ready for Midway's crew to kill you. My default is yes, obviously. Because she has stability problems, yes. But she's still a big ship.
The corollary to that is you never can be quite sure.
Yeah.
Like, probably is not a very reassuring answer. But that's really all we got.
Yeah.
Like-
Is it will it survive?
We
Probably.
don't
Theoretically, Kitty Hawk, when she sailed into the typhoon that she sailed into, and there's video of this, of her taking green water over the bow. This is Kitty Hawk in like the 2000s, by the way. Could have been sunk by that typhoon. Like the typhoon she was in and sailed through.
Christ. That's terrifying.
Because that's how typhoons work. That's how hurricanes work. You get
They
the
don't
wrong
have a
wind
ship.
conditions with the wave and wrong currents.
And you're just fucked.
That's it. Good night, Vienna. You're done. Next question, which is actually kind of a tie into the last one. Brackman asks, what if the USA built the Midways in larger numbers and then sold off some of the older Essexes?
Pretty much nobody could afford to run an Essex
There's a reason why
except the US.
there's a reason why the RN light fleet sold so well. Because they were basically carrier on a budget.
They were also sold off relatively cheaply, as I recall.
It's not just the sales price that makes it work. It's the running costs. An Essex is an entirely different ball game to a light fleet to run. Massively so.
Yeah, no denying that. But also, how much do you think the US would sell an Essex for versus what Britain tried to sell the light fleet carriers
It really
for?
doesn't matter because no one's going to look at
Given
the
given the US's history of giving stuff away in that period,
You know, like, there's a very real chance that they'd have sold them for a nominal sum if they could find somebody to buy them.
The only nation I can see picking up an Essex or two is France, in the immediate post-war period. So instead of getting a British carrier, the French get a pair of Essexes. That's the only thing I can see in the immediate post-war period.
And
They're the only navy with the need, that's friendly enough with the US at the time, and can run them.
And then, the original question of the point is, they get rid of some of the older Essexes and build more midways instead. We can sell a few Essexes and still have a bunch.
Yeah.
Like the quantities we built those things, the quantity we built those things in.
It's
The
important.
U.S.
pull-
ended World War II with 15 fleet carriers.
Like we're randomly pulling them in and out of mothballs for decades, literally decades. Using them for
refitting them as needed.
Like the
Um,
Essex has served for an incredibly long time in even near frontline roles. It's
So essentially,
Like,
their issue
we-
is they're not like fleet carriers. Like
Yeah,
they're
like-
not babies first. As far as I know, very mechanically reliable.
No, they were very mechanically reliable ships.
it's just the overall running cost. They're
The,
just
the,
so
the sheer
much
number
bigger.
of crew.
They're just so much bigger. Like, yes, they're much more capable, but the costs involved they're just beyond the reach of nations.
when all you need is a carrier. Like that's the thing, right? Like they are more capable, but that extra capability is more than you probably need if you're if you're a random nation looking to get a carrier, because you are either especially when you start to look at like who we're willing to let them go to, right? Like anybody who we might sell an SX is allied to us, and in the event that all hell breaks loose, there will be an Essex there anyway. Except they won't have to pay for that one.
Yeah, what the U.S. sold more and or transferred more of were the light carriers, the cruiser-derived light carriers.
Yeah, those things went like
Which one?
hotcakes.
Spain, France. I know there were other nations interested in them that didn't get them, but like the light fleets occupied a nice niche of capability and cost, both to buy and run. There were vanishingly few navies that could afford to run an Essex and its escort, let alone just the ship.
The only navy that could really pull it off would be the Royal Navy or the Soviets.
Or the
And they're
French.
not being sold to the Soviets.
The French probably could have gotten away with one Essex if they really wanted to.
Yeah. Because Slayer's asking how would French naval aviation change if they went with two Essex instead of one light aircraft?
They would have had to have gotten rid of the battleship.
which they
Bar
were
none,
loath,
like they would.
which they were loath to do because they kind of wanted to keep
And
it
Jean
around.
Bar, it was Jean Bar, right?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Jean Bar that was around
Okay.
for the longest time.
Jean Bar was an excellent battleship and a huge asset.
She was also, compared to the other big gun warships of the world, incredibly fresh and new and mechanically
The only ones that
sound.
really could. Yeah, it was like her and the Iowas.
And even then, she had a good 5 years newness on the Iowas. In fact, I think it was more than. Let me just have a
Well,
look.
yes, and the Iowas did transit the Pacific, so
Let me see. When was she finished? Oh yeah, she wasn't actually commissioned till 49. Yeah, so she's got a good 5 years on the Iowas.
Yeah, but how much of that counts?
and she sailed transatlantic in the interim to help with fitting out. And
Oh yeah.
like
was that Richelieu?
No, that was Richelieu. Jean Bar wasn't actually. Jean Bar wasn't actually fully. She did like the only sailing Jean Bar did prior to her completion was to Casablanca, where if you remember, she fought that famous
Yeah.
duel with
Yeah.
what was it?
The only time
Alabama?
she really actually sailed was post 1955.
I thought that was Massachusetts. You got
No,
it wrong.
no, no, no,
Yeah, it
no,
was
she
It's
sailed.
Massa.
Sorry, Massachusetts. No, she sailed before that dragon. It was just that she.
Yeah, I know. As about any long-term sail, though, was basically only 55.
Oh no, she did training cruisers and cruised with the French fleet through 50.
When?
Yeah, in May and June 1950, and then again in 51.
Yes, but considering she was only fully formally commissioned in 55, that's more working up than necessarily
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, she
actually
did. Yeah,
doing stuff.
So apparently she was okay. So according to this, she was pronounced complete on 1st of May 55, which is that's a hell of a build time.
Yeah, it took him a minute. I mean, I can understand why.
I mean, she was sailing
I mean,
around
yeah,
for a lot
they're
of that
French.
period.
They don't
but
like
still.
working.
I mean, Foxo, I hate to be that guy, but I think this little thing called the Second World War might have intervened. Just a thought.
Oh no! I'm talking about the fact the French are lazy. They riot all the time. They drink too much wine. They smell like goats.
They throw poo at
frogs.
people's doors too much.
They throw donkeys off tower blocks.
To be fair, the French haven't had a very good relation with the ocean either. Like,
I will
they
point
seem
out.
to
Yeah,
have
every time
quite
they
an
sail something
explosive
out, it comes
reaction.
back with the British flag at some point, right?
Inevitably.
But yeah, as we were saying, basically, the
Oh God, cursed
you
Richelieu
know,
timeline captured
know,
by the British.
Jean Bar, good asset. They want to keep it around. Which is where we were before. You were saying Cyclic, Carrier, Jean Bar, having to get rid of. That's where I think we were.
Yeah, because I don't think
For
there's a
two
way that
Essexes,
France affords two Essex unless doing that. One maybe, but
I mean, and we know the French actually did get a pair of their own carriers, but that happened later.
Well, and again, right? They could pay for an Essex. The question is, why would
France
they?
is having to rebuild their
Um,
country.
When
right now,
again,
yeah.
they want an carrier. They don't like. Is the Essex a better carrier? Sure, they don't care. They want an carrier.
And so they get and
Well, so
carriers.
the French are in an interesting position. Because they did get a U.S. light carrier. And so when you they're in a really odd spot when you look at what they were fielding. And the reason for me hemming and hawing here is their carrier fleet did have a lot of inefficiency in it because it wasn't uniform at all. They had some escort carriers, they had a light carrier, and I believe they had a light fleet.
Oh Christ, what was that?
It was sort of the aircraft carrier equivalent to the modern day Polish tank force.
Oh. Go on. I am intrigued.
They had like 3 or 4 different classes of different types of carrier. If my memory is correct, and I'm sure somebody here will correct me if I am wrong. That's why I said sort of. Oh, that said, I would say Poland's modern tank fleet has shrunk in the number of types of tank that currently operates.
Yeah, because
Um,
you know.
A bunch of them went to a neighbor.
One way-
What the fuck's Germany need with that many tanks?
A bunch of them were driven to the border, then got lost.
Wow. and to this day we don't know where they are.
Rumor has it they're still running around Ukraine.
Rumor has it they're killing Russians.
I mean, if we want to talk about funny shenanigans with lost
Let's
weapon
not.
systems, you'll understand where I'm going, because it's related to the question about French buying carriers and such. There's the whole
Yeah.
farce
So,
that was
just
sorry,
based
I'll-
on what
I'll-
Chad is saying here on the specific types, they had 2 Independence class, Baron, and a CVE.
Good lord.
And they replaced all of this with 2 Clemenceaus.
which makes perfect sense when you think about it.
And when you look at a Clemenceau, it's in a very interesting class or size range.
Yeah, it's about 22,000 tons standard, 32,000 tons max.
Like, if the French wanted to, they could have operated 2 Essexes. They just would have had to structure their fleet differently because the bulk of the country's money needed to go to rebuilding the country for that decade post-war.
What do you mean?
I mean, it totally wasn't a battleground at all, right? I will say the Clemenceaus are beautiful ships.
I can agree with Cyclic on that. They are fantastic looking.
Wait, but you're a dirty Francophile, Flea.
Now, just a minute.
Like,
She's
I
not
don't know.
wrong.
I hate the fact that she's not wrong.
We could show you a battle carrier version of the Richelieu, and you would say it's a beautiful ship.
I
Admittedly,
would,
the
I
Right.
would
Admittedly,
not.
You
the
would
battle
compliment
carrier
Baron.
version of that doesn't actually look that
Yeah,
bad.
Cyclic, you weren't here for me getting my arse torn by Dr. Clark for me saying that Bern was better than Eagle. I have since retracted that statement.
Yes, that
Yeah, I
was
was gonna say that's an
oh
interesting
so
statement.
glorious.
That right, Your Honor, I rest my case.
Yeah, but it's different with
Oh,
Bern
this
because
is
she's
glory.
a full carrier. I can't defend a battle carrier, but
So
I tried to
Eagle?
defend Bern.
You shouldn't have.
Me and Drac had a discussion over it, but he couldn't convince me. But Dr. Clark was not quite so nice as
Like-
Drac was.
Honestly,
Dr. Clark
it's
doesn't have a problem with humiliating somebody.
He definitely.
Live and on air. And I'm here for... Oh, guess who's home? Stand by.
Oh, standing by.
But I would actually say, of all the battle carriers, the Jean Bartry Fate battle carrier, at least visually, doesn't actually look the worst.
No, but it's still a terrible idea, and it should feel bad.
I'm not
for
disagreeing
existing.
there.
Somebody
But
should have
still.
convinced the Soviets to build it.
Probably would have.
I would have loved to have seen that.
Yes.
Stalingrad battle carrier.
Am I gonna have to take you to room 60?
It's like a while ago, there was somebody on the
yeah.
dry dock, I believe they've since left, who was trying to argue that the plan should build battleships again because you can't sink battleships with missiles.
Oh, not that old chestnut again. Cyclic, we've done at least 4 non-recorded
And
ramblings.
My
and
my
3
my
recorded-
response to it was, yes, I would love them to.
That'd be fucking great.
What a waste
I'd
of
love
resources.
them to because you know what the primary produced anti-ship missile by the Taiwanese has?
Go on.
A broach warhead
Oh.
that has a larger diameter shaped charge precursor to that of JSOW. And do you know what JSOW can do?
Punch through any armor plate in existence.
Put its 250-pound semi-armor piercing charge through the turret front plate of Yamato. By the way, Phoenix, check and see if Phoenix is in chat.
Looking. Not yet, he's not.
I'll keep an eye out.
Yeah, like Cyclic, I'm just counting off fingers from memory. I can remember 4 non-recorded ramblings, 1 recorded ramblings, and 3 live ramblings where we
Because
have
it's so funny.
Yeah,
And
where
I
we
once-
Yeah, where we
I
have
want somebody at the plan to get brainworms and do it. I
Yeah,
think it would be
because-
absolutely hilarious.
we have buried this horse about battleships being able to kill
It's
carriers.
Even
About battleships being able to be killed by missiles so many times. I am running out of space in the graveyard. There are so many
I don't-
graves dedicated to
I
this
don't
one
understand why it keeps coming back. Like
Mo, the problem is the shape charge equation.
shape charges don't play fair.
topic. There is
Also,
no...
if they get to the point where that's no longer practical, oh no, Phoenix, we are making fun of somebody from years ago. If they get to the point where that's no longer practical, there's an even simpler solution. Contact fused nuclear weapon.
Or of
That's
course...
a bit excessive,
Oh
isn't
no!
it?
Oh no! Cycling.
You won't have you won't ever see that ship again.
Turkey!
I said, I feel
Oh no!
that's a
Cycling.
little
Oh no!
excessive.
Cycling! Cycling! I can go even better than that. Bloody Mark 48 under the keel. Boom. Done.
No, I'm talking about literally you make that the warhead on the missile.
Yeah, but
It ain't
but
missile proof.
We already have.
The question was, how
how
heavy does a battleship have to be now to actually be missile proof? And the answer is you can't
You
make one
can't.
missile proof.
Unless
You
you,
need an
the only
iceberg.
method you can do is shoot the
Theoretically-
missile down and pray.
Theoretically, Dromaeosaurus, you can do that.
There's also the slight problem that a 2,000-pound bomb.
Go burr. Or 5,000-pound bunker buster. Go
I mean,
burr.
we have those too, but like even way
Or
back
better
in, like,
yet,
the Second
if you
World
re-
War era,
if-
you could not get like the heaviest deck armor was not going to resist that much in terms of an armor-piercing bomb.
Moab is not a penetrating warhead. The
Like, you
bomb,
want
you're-
to-
you want to
the
know
bomb
what
you
is
want to
that
talk about,
Hellboy.
Narwhal, is the MOP. Massive Ordnance Penetrator.
Mop. Drop a
You
mop
can
on
watch
them,
a
boys.
B-2 Spirit climb about 20 feet when it drops 1.
Mm.
Hey, Cyclic. I guess we mopped the floor with that hypothetical battleship, eh?
Oh God,
Shut the fuck up.
thieves.
No,
like,
I
we
will
actually
not.
have historical
Fleet, the
examples
window
of
is
very
there,
large-
lock it on your way out.
Like, we actually have a historical example of very big bombs used against ships. It's called Tallboy and Tirpitz.
And it went straight through the ship and came out the other side.
And here's the thing, the bigger the ship you are, the worse you react to that.
It's true.
Like, if you're Yamato, there's a chance that bomb fuses inside.
Oh my god.
That ends very badly.
That
for
is
Oh,
why
you.
it's
Lord.
just 2,000-pounders. Because
Hey, Phoenix, laser guided 2,000-pounders just absolutely hammer home the point you are not safe. Like, we don't even need...
oh yeah, absolutely. You could just toss. You can toss them. They're laser guided, and yeah,
You can even
and-
put an imaging fucking sensor on it these days.
Absolutely. And bear in mind that battleship is not going to be able to defend itself against like decent long-range laser-guided bombs too, because you're not going to get anything more sophisticated. That again, because it's a battleship with big guns. I'm assuming we're talking about, right? You're not going to have anything more sophisticated than man pads for surface-to-air missile defense on the ship itself. You have escorts, fine, but then the escorts are more useful than the capital ship you're having them sit with.
Yeah, this is why, Cyclic, I need your help for if and when Dr.
Uh-oh.
Clark comes back today. Please, please, please. He's managed to strong arm me into working new build capital ships into the Red Fleet timeline for the RN. I want him to stop. Please make him stop. I don't
No,
want
I'm
the
not.
RN
He's telling the
No,
truth,
I'm not.
Luke.
I'm gonna let him happily torture you.
Yeah,
Moving
I'm
along.
trying to be sensible. I'm trying to.
No, it's the Red
Oh,
Fleet
wait,
timeline.
no, right.
You
To
made
quote,
your bed.
trying to be
Sleep in it.
Fine,
Trying
I
to
will.
be sensible. Graf Zeplinski.
Look, it was a different time, all right.
That's had it
That's
like
that's
five
what
different
that's what
refits.
Kuznetsov is. It
I've
literally,
heard that joke before.
like literally. How many granites was she designed to carry? Again, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. I wanna
Let
say
me have a
like
look.
12. I don't believe it's 24. 24 is the Oscar.
Your typical gunnery officer asks.
It
If
is.
Taiho-
No, fuck. It is. No, sorry. It's 24 Kinzels in Kinzals.
That's not.
Or,
That's
or 12
Fleet-
granites.
Fleet.
Short-range
Kinzal is Naval Sam.
No. I was
Naval
listing,
Tour, sorry.
I was listing both. So you've got the 24 anti-ship. The 24 SAMs, and then you do have 12 granites.
It's not 24 Sams.
That's what it says.
You're off by a 0.
Oh.
Um,
Oh, there we go. 24
It's
8
launchers.
cell. Yeah, 24 8 cell. Oh yeah, that's 8. Wow, they have VLS. Fucking hell. Oh, sorry, not VLS. Sorry.
It- it's Tor's strange VLS. Don't worry about it.
Ooh, I think. Hey, it looks like we've got a. I don't know if for certain, but this looks like a new image. I'd not seen this one before.
Oh no. Let's see. Doddle's been out of the way.
She looks almost decent.
I don't know if she's out of Drydock yet or not. I haven't really cared because
From what I heard,
like
she's been,
while the Russians do actually need her,
from the scuttlebutt mean scoot of her.
to me she's just a target. So
Oh no, I know, but I mean,
It'll
one
be
of the things
amusing to see what happens to said target.
I mean, one of the things we have had to do is, like, there used to be a whole, like, me and the Cyclic Dig went a long way in the past few months to debunking the whole Kuznetsov she's just a scrap heap. We've managed to bury that one at least.
yeah, so Drome, the problem with Granite is it's not a very sophisticated missile when you get down to the Seeker. And you always know where the salvo is.
Is that an issue?
Yeah, because you get the warning. 12 inbounds, 24 inbounds.
Aegis is gonna
When
have
you
a field
start
day
when
with
you
that.
start even before Aegis. When you start running the math on the engagement time frame and stuff like that, 2 twin-armed ships with SM2, even 20 granites is... That's the real problem of the Soviet missiles. In this context, they just don't have the throw weight in a lot of cases. The nasty thing about Granite is when it's an Oscar, and you ain't got a clue because you've had no raid warning. You don't know it's there because that Oscar is firing based off satellite data outside of your radar horizon.
Apparently, your image is about 7 years old, Bleat.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
So,
But still,
You know what? I've got to
what
say.
type of air group would Bracken's asking what type of air group would she actually have today?
Well,
Predominantly Su-33s with some Kamovs.
they've been running down their inventory, haven't they? Though of Su-33s.
They're I believe they're planning on moving more towards MiG-29K, which is a aircraft that makes a heck of a lot more sense for her. Given what her role is.
Just for the layman, would you mind explaining why MiG-29K is better than the 33?
Yeah, it fits. It fits the ship. Flanker is huge. Like, for reference, J-20 is a better fit for a carrier
What's
than
J-20?
Flanker D. J-20, the big old Chinese stealth fighter.
Oh, is that the one that's stealth in quotation? Here,
It's far more stealth than just U-57. Like, Flanker is ginormous. I think we've had this discussion like before here, but it makes an F-15E look small. Makes an F-14 look small. They are big aircraft. They are tall. They are wide.
The funny thing is, with the thing is that the Russians actually they're better set up to deal with MiG-29K as well because they have an active spares production line going to service the MiG-29Ks of the Indian Navy. And
They've kept spares production for 33 fine. That's not really the issue. The issue is they don't want to have to modernize it, and it's not a good fit for the ship.
yeah. Oh, no. What I mean
Anyhow.
is, What I mean is the transfer from 33 to 29 isn't gonna. It's not gonna be as much of a pain as some people might expect it to be. If there's
Why
gonna be
would
any
it
pain
be
at
a
all.
pain to begin with?
I hear
Yeah, I don't
some,
know that anybody was expecting it to be much of a pain.
some idiots that I speak to, blah 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 blah. You can't.
There's a lot of idiots around the world, I'm afraid,
it's
Bleat.
yeah, I know. I know. I mean, while we're on the tangent, it's something we've not actually discussed. But India's aircraft carriers. I feel like it's something that we've never
What
actually
about them?
discussed in a. Well,
Well, they're a thing.
They're a thing, but not
they
much of a
exist.
thing.
Like,
what do you mean by that, Cyclic?
I don't know enough about.
The
not much to
only
get
thing
into.
they're really useful against is the Pakistani Navy, which isn't much of a thing. To put it mildly, and
They
it's
feel almost more like a national pride thing of, hey, look,
yes,
you've got a
broadly.
carrier.
So
For anyone not aware, these are the two
They
ships
don't-
to which I refer.
Vikrant in particular has very little growth room because of the way they've designed her freaking lifts.
Namely, don't design lifts around the MiG-29.
Yeah, carrying a single MiG-29 at that. But like, they're not very useful ships at doing anything than providing limited air cover over the Indian Navy. Which, I mean, I guess is useful given the air-launched anti-ship missiles the Pakistani Air Force has for their JF-17s. And well, I'll let Phoenix talk about the air defense issue for the Indian Navy.
Please, I'm all ears. I'm intrigued.
Oh dear God! Hang on, let me go in.
The phrase single-armed bandit is quite common.
Oh God, yeah. Well, hang on, let me pull out my list. Hang on.
The man has a
Spreadsheet
list.
for everything. Let me tell you.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. If only we all had
Sounds like-
spreadsheets.
It almost sounds like it's the Book of Grudges. Just that's going in
The
the book.
Book of Modern
Ugh.
Naval Grudges.
Spreadsheets.
Oh god.
All right. Because, yeah. So India has, at present, what is it? 12 destroyers for their navy, right? Now, half of these are modern ships, the Kolkata class, the Project 15B types, or A and B, I believe. Kolkata, and the other one I won't even try and pronounce because it's very long, and I am not very familiar with Indian names. But these are built around having 32 VLS for Barak 8, which is an Israeli medium-range SAM. It's fine. It does the job, right? Not brilliant, not bad, whatever. But the other two classes, and those are 3 ships each class, and the other classes are the Delhi class and the Rajput class. Now the Delhi class, if I just pull these guys up real quick, I mean you guys can probably look at these too. These are basically they're built off the Rajput class, which are modified Kashin class destroyers from the Soviets. The Delhi class have 2 single arm launchers for Shtil, which is basically naval Buk. Yes, you heard me right. Those are single arm launchers.
This doesn't sound very
and-
encouraging. I'm just gonna say this now.
No, in the Rajput class
It shouldn't.
S-125, navalized S-125. So, yeah. I mean, they
So,
are
what
adding
does that
VLS
look
for
like,
short
people?
range missiles now, but like,
It's still not.
yeah, it's really it's pretty friggin' awful, to be honest. Now for what it's worth, their frigate classes, which traditionally have only had like short range / point defense SAMs, if that. The newer ones that are coming out with they're building now is supposed to have Barak 8 too, so they're gonna have a lot more medium range firepower soon. Relatively soon. This is still India, so the rate that they build ships is like decades. Usually by 10 years for a frigate or destroyer.
They
so,
make the British and the Russians look quick.
Hey.
yeah.
We're not complete shit.
Do you want Phoenix to start talking about the Type 26 class?
No, we can move on. It's fine. Let's leave that where it is, please.
We already know the Royal Navy might as well be rolling over in its grave.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
I would.
Just don't ask what happened to the RFA.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah.
Hang on, that Rajput that's just a Russian ship.
Well, then again, Moe is asking
Yes?
for more info about the Type 26, so...
No, please.
boy.
Fleet Sanity can't take it.
Oh, hey, it's been requested. Because Canadians are trying to get into them, aren't they?
Okay, we can focus on the Canadians specifically and ignore the.
Oh yeah, that's a whole
Please.
whole thing.
Fleet can't
Hey,
take any more.
Why not? It sounds
Great
interesting.
I mean, so what the Canadians have done is basically they've taken the type. So the British Type 26 is very much it's an ASW focused frigate with significant strike capability, land attack capability, right? Because there's 24 VLS that are basically only going to be for anti-ship missiles or land attack cruise missiles.
Mm-hmm.
The Canadians took that design and basically said we want to have a multi-role frigate. They want 15 of them because they want only a single type of major surface combatant because Canada unfortunately stuck basically having two separate fleets because of the geography, right? The Atlantic and the Pacific might as well be entirely separate from each other. So they don't want to have to bother like they used to, right? Where they had frigates, they had destroyers, but they only had a handful of destroyers, so they had to split between two fleets, and the availability was crap. So they wanted to have a single type of ship they can throw in each fleet, so each fleet has balanced capabilities, which is reasonable. So these are going to be basically Type 26s upgraded with actual air warfare capabilities. They're going to be built around the Spy 7 radar, which is S-band, ESA. They're going to have SM-2MR Block 3C, which is active version of Standard Missile 2. And they're also going to have ESSM. They're going to have CAM separately as point defense for whatever reason. And there's been back and forth as to whether or not... the Canadian Navy definitely has the ambition of putting Tomahawk on them. Weird thing is they still only have 24 VLS for SM-2, ESSM quad packs, and Tomahawk if they take it.
For reference, 24 Mark 41 cells with SM2 and ESSM get you 16 SM2 and 32 ESSM.
If they quad pack 8 cells.
Yeah.
Granted, they could go up and down with that count.
Because they do have the 6 cells of CAM for 24.
Yeah. But, anywho, so there is a whole thing with as far as Canadian media goes and the Canadian government and the parliamentary budget office, right? Because when Canada costs out these programs, they kind of go over the whole life of the ship. There's also the whole process of designing the ship, modifying it, building it, but also building up the infrastructure to actually support the construction of the ships, because that does not exist at present, or it did not until very recently. It's because Canada had not built any warships in a hot minute. So that kind of makes it a very expensive program. The reason why, though, is again because they have to build up that capability, and they're also costing out long-term service support of these ships. And the justification is they want to actually build these ships at home. Otherwise, they have to order them from abroad. And loosely speaking, when you're procuring ships or any military hardware, right? If you're entirely wholesale procuring it from abroad, that means you are basically throwing money out of your economy, if you suck that from your taxpayers, into somebody else's economy entirely. If you spend it at home to build ships at home, even if significant portions of the subsystems are procured abroad, right? Because that is the case. A lot of these systems are, varying flavors of mostly American, but also there's some British, some Italian, it's some French, etc. You're spending that money within your own economy. Those are going to, supporting the shipyards that you have, all the various supply firms upstream of that shipyard, paying your own workers, right? So that money goes back into your economy, and there are significant economic multipliers from that. And also, it gives you the ability to support these ships at home. Later on, these yards can do maintenance work on these ships, as opposed to having to, say, send them overseas. So there are some cost savings in terms of overall economic impact that you get from having done this program within your own country. It's really Canada and Australia are really kind of unique in this regard, where they're two relatively rich, advanced economies that have lots of money to spend on significant navies, but also just lack the shipbuilding industry to do them at home by themselves, design and build ships themselves, or export them. So they're really in awkward spots when it comes to this. They're very unique in that regard. And that's kind of why their programs are very, very similar overall in terms of building up the infrastructure, then build the ships, and that's why they get these huge budget programs that attract very, very dramatic headlines from media that is not very literate when it comes to shipbuilding programs.
When is the media very literate when it comes to defense anyway?
Not rarely, yeah, you know. I mean, there are specialist outlets that do a good job. I'll always shout out Naval News. They do a good job. EDR, European Defense Review, they do a pretty good job too. DefenseNews.com isn't bad either. USNI News is also pretty good. But yeah, overall, like when it comes to like mass media, right? Like your Wall Street Journals, your Forbes, those kind of outlets, the Financial Times out of Australia. Their program does not deserve to have scathing reviews. Sometimes they really do deserve to have.
Yeah, we get it.
Here. They absolutely deserve to have the to be roughly run over, but. Oh god, I see we're posting pictures of the awful Canadian Sea Sparrow launching system.
The dangle missiles, as I called.
For Mark 29, so like